Okay, welcome members to the reconvened meeting of Derry City Reconvened District Council. I'm going to start off as normal here and pass it on to Philip just for agenda 1 and 2.
Good afternoon, members. You're hereby summoned to attend this reconvened monthly meeting of Derry City and Strabane District Council to be held remotely on Monday, the 4th of October 2021 at 4 p.m. Starting off with the roll call, Alderman Alan Breslin.
Here, Philip.
Alderman Morris Devaney.
Here, Philip.
Alderman Darren Guy. Alderman Derek Hussey.
Hi, here, Philip.
Alderman Keith Kerrigan.
Here, Philip.
Alderman Hilary McClintock.
Philip.
Alderman Ryan McCready. Alderman Ryan McCready. Alderman David Ramsey. Alderman David Ramsey.
Here.
Thanks, David. Alderman Graham Wark, present.
Here.
Councillor Jason Barr. Councillor Jason Barr. Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor John Boyle.
Good afternoon, Philip. I think Jason's on his way into the meeting, but not with us currently.
That's fine, thanks. Councillor Michaela Boyle.
And Shaw, Philip.
Councillor Sean Carr.
Philip.
Councillor Shauna Cusack.
Here, Philip.
Councillor Angela Dobbins.
Here, Philip.
Councillor Gary Donnelly.
And Shaw.
Councillor Emmett Doyle. Councillor Doyle. Councillor Sandra Duffy.
Shaw.
Councillor Stephen Edwards.
John, Philip.
Councillor Rory Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Rachel Ferguson. Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Paul Fleming.
Running
Councillor
late,
Fleming.
Philip.
Okay,
He's running
thanks.
late.
Thanks. Councillor Paul Gallagher.
And Shaw. Philip.
Councillor Sean Harkin.
Here.
Councillor Conor Heaney.
Apologies.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Christopher Jackson.
And Shaw, Philip.
Councillor Dan Kelly. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Patricia Logue.
Shaw.
Councillor Emma McGinley.
And Shaw, Philip.
Councillor Kieran Maguire. Councillor Maguire. Councillor Rory McHugh. Councillor McHugh. Councillor Jim McKeever. Councillor McKeever. Councillor Philip McKinney. Councillor McKinney. Councillor Sean Mooney. Councillor Mooney.
Here, Philip.
Councillor Damien Mullen.
Apologies.
Thank you. Councillor Maeve O'Neill.
Here.
Councillor Martin Riley.
Here.
Councillor Lillian Sinoy Barr.
Here.
Councillor Brian Tierney.
Here, Philip.
Thank you. And I have from Ryan McCready as he's put his attendance in the chat box.
Thank you, Philip.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil, for that there. Okay, members, moving on to agenda 3, stepping in a remote meeting. I'd like to remind everyone of remote attendance today. This meeting will be broadcasted live via the council YouTube channels and be available for viewing to the public and media. The broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with council protocol, and members and the approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics on and cameras while speaking at the meeting, and to use chat facilities highlighted and request to speak. By participating in this meeting, you're contented to being filmed and the use of storage of those images for broadcasting and training purposes, and for the purpose of keeping historic records and making the records available to the public. Copy of the council privacy notice being found on the council webpage. Members, decoration of members' interest, agenda 4 can be raised now or put on the chat box throughout the meeting. Members, I think we're all aware. First of all, I'd like to thank Deputy Mayor Christopher for taking last Thursday night's meeting. And secondly, very sad news, the sad news about the passing of the former councillor Jim Clifford, a dedicated public servant and a family man. Jim loved the city so well and all the people he represented. He was a real character and widely respected. Sincere condolences today to Jim's family and the wider friends. I have Mr. O'Reilly looking to come on.
Mayor, thanks for bringing me in, and thanks to you for your words in relation to former councillor Jim Clifford. On behalf of the SDLP, I just want to also pay tribute to Jimmy. Jimmy was a public servant for many decades, not just serving the people of the Cregan area in his capacity as a local representative, but also doing so in many other ways as a volunteer and in terms of contributions he made to wider city service, such as being involved closely with St Vincent de Paul. We also know that Jimmy was an avid Derry City football fan, loved his soccer and loved the enjoyment and the crack that we had at council meetings back when we were obviously all meeting in a physical way in the old Guildhall. I'm not sure what Jimmy would have made of this virtual arrangements that we have become accustomed to now over recent months, but certainly during the time when we were meeting in person, he was a very enjoyable person to sit beside during the council meetings. He enjoyed the conversation and the politics. He served the people of his city-side DEA so well over so many decades, and he'd be greatly missed by the people of Cregan, and obviously missed most pressingly by his family, his daughters, and I want to pay condolences to Martina, Anne-Marie, Patricia and Roshing and the wider Clifford family at this sad time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, I have a number of speakers looking on here. Councillor Donnelly.
My August Chair, and just to be associated with the previous remarks, Jimmy was a friend and a neighbour, a very good neighbour, and I'd just like to be associated and pass my condolences on to the girls. Jimmy was very, first and foremost, he was working class, and he was a good friend to the people of Cregan. He didn't do airs nor graces, he was just down to earth, and he'll be badly missed. So again, just like to send my condolences to his daughters. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly, for that. Alderman Devaney.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in. And on behalf of the DUP, can I just pass on our condolences to the Clifford family and the wider family. And I think anyone who knew Jimmy was a real character. But as the previous speaker has said, look, he was working class stock, and many's a conversation I had with him. Some very, very good conversations. And I have to say, I know he was a very Derry City fan, but he was an ardent Celtic fan as well. And I remember Gregory Campbell, when they were in council, that had been the first point of debate when they would have entered the chamber. And it was, look, it was light-hearted and good for him. But just to add our condolences to the Clifford family.
Thank you for that, Alderman Devaney. Councillor McGinley.
Gora Mega for letting me on there, Chair. Just on behalf of Sinn Féin, I want to send the condolences to family, friends, and Jimmy Clifford's colleagues within the SDLP as well. Jimmy was a hard-working councillor for the people of Cregan. I always remember him growing up when I was growing up in Cregan. So I think it's safe to say nobody would argue about the work he done for people in Cregan. So just to send our condolences as well to the family and wider circle. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, just to also extend People Before Profit's condolences on behalf of People Before Profit, our condolences to Jim Clifford's family and friends, and also SDLP colleagues. Like he, as other people have mentioned, he had a real love for Derry and the people of Craigan, and did so much for the community of Craigan here. And his appeal and work reached way beyond the SDLP. So it's a sad loss for the city. Thanks.
Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Just I want to be associated as well with the remarks today and say my condolences to the Clifford family. I have known Jimmy long before politics, and say just to say my condolences as well to the family. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Alderman Guy.
You, Mayor, for letting me in there. I'd just like to pass on behalf of the Ulster Unionist Party, pass on my condolences to the Clifford family. I didn't know Jimmy personally, but I know him and Mary got on really well. And on behalf of Mary as well, I'd just like to pass on our condolences. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Fred Alderman Guy, and thank you, members. I think from all of us here, our condolences today with the family and his friends for the sad loss of Councillor John Clifford. Members, just a bit of housekeeping here. Just to remind you, on proposed motions today, you'll be 3 minutes, and responding to the motion will be 2 minutes. And from myself, everyone who attended Supercar, the Mayor's Supercar Sunday yesterday, total success and a lot of money raised for Floyd Down syndrome. So thank you from myself. So members, moving on now to agenda 5, notice of motions. Councillor Duffy to move.
Mugget, Mayor. Just see if I have a seconder there. There's Michaela.
Okay.
Thank you, Michaela. Okay, Gurmugget. So what does a home mean for most people? A home is an enjoyable, happy place where you can live, laugh, and learn. It's somewhere where you can love and be loved. A home provides security, belonging, identity, and privacy. Imagine working your entire life, scraping together enough money to finally get that mortgage. The excitement of picking up the keys, of moving in and starting a life, watching your children grow, and then a crack appears in your kitchen wall. You dismiss it as natural settling, but then more and more cracks start appearing. You know in your heart what you're faced with. It's the same problem that your neighbour is dealing with. It is Micah. Your hard-earned, hard work for home is crumbling. It is unsafe. You move your family into one side as the cracks aren't too bad there. But every night you go to bed, you lay awake as you know only too well how this will end. It will end with your beautiful home in ruins. It will end with you still paying a mortgage on a property that doesn't exist anymore. This is one family's experience. It is John's story, but it is far from rare. Thousands of homes in Donegal are crumbling due to defective blocks. Deirdre told her story on RTE News last week. She stood outside a clearly crumbling home and broke down at the weight of dealing with this and cancer, how her doctors had advised her to avoid stress. How, she cried, could she avoid stress? Rose is from Derry. She is in her 80s. She moved to Donegal to retire 10 years ago. She bought her dream home that she would leave to her children. Rose's home is riddled with cracks. She cannot afford to pay for the engineer to test her property, but she knows. She has used up her savings buying her home. She won't get a mortgage now, so she feels lost, alone, and broken. How can the Irish government allow this to happen? How can they stand over this and justify not fully assisting people, particularly when it was the failed policies of the so-called Celtic Tiger that has caused this disaster? This is heartbreaking stuff. This is the stuff of absolute nightmares. We need to help people out of this waking hell. They need 100% redress. Anything else than this will leave many families destitute. And again, I must highlight the fact that there are many families across this council area who have ploughed their hard-earned money into treasured holiday homes that are not included in any scheme, and this must also be rectified. I congratulate the Micah Action Group that have been doing sterling work, raising the profile of this issue, taking it onto the streets, taking it to the heart of Dublin. A special mention to Paddy, Michael, Eileen, Anne, and all others who have tirelessly worked on this issue. I stand in full admiration and solidarity with you and wish you well over the coming weeks, particularly the protest planned for the 8th of October. To the Housing Minister, Darren O'Brien, I ask that you honour the motion passed in the Dáil on the 15th of June for full redress, and I remind you of the tragedies that came out of the Priory Hall scandal. This is the desperation that you are placing on families and on their mental health. It is time to act now, Minister. Gurmugga.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to Councillor Duffy for bringing this motion forward. The SDLP are fully supportive of the MICA campaign and the fight for 100% redress. Firstly, I want to congratulate the MICA Action Group. It is only because of them and their ongoing struggle that any progress at all has been made. And I'd like to pay a tribute to my friend Eileen Doherty, who has helped start and who has championed this campaign, and I know how difficult it has been for them. On a personal level, having close family and friends whose lives have been ripped apart by MICA, I understand the devastation it has caused. 10 years ago, my brother-in-law Aidan and his wife Karina bought their forever home in Redcastle. Soon after, they had two special needs children, Ryan, who is severely autistic, and Evie, who has Down syndrome. Children who need a secure, safe home, children who need they need familiar surroundings, and children who need a lot of space. Their mum gave up work to look after them. Today, their home is crumbling around them. They're being told that it will cost an additional 100,000, and the family have to live in and pay for all the expenses, including living in a caravan on the site until their home can be rebuilt. And this is a story for thousands of other similar young families. From a Derry's perspective, as Councillor Duffy has already mentioned, I'd like to highlight that there are many people from Derry and Strabane who have second homes, possibly retirement homes, who are excluded from this scheme. They form an integral part of communities in Donegal and have been a huge boost to their economies as well. So what does it say about cross-border relations and support of these homeowners also if they are ignored by the Irish government? No one should be left out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Alderman McClintock.
You, Mayor, for letting me in, and can I say thank you to Councillor Duffy for bringing this notice of motion, and I can also say thank you to her for providing the details. These are not statistics. These people that are affected, these are real people and real lives that have been absolutely disrupted because of this MICA scandal really that is going on. It is absolutely devastating for people. Everyone has a human right to have their home, and the homes that people have saved for so long, to find them crumbling before their eyes. And I think we've all been absolutely affected by seeing the pictures on the media, on TV, of homes that people standing crying as their home crumbled before them. And unfortunately, it seems that the scale of this is maybe even bigger than what was first thought, with people in other areas also concerned that their homes may have been built with MICA involved in them. Absolutely stand with everybody who is calling for the 100% redress, whether they be from this council area or from any part of the Republic of Ireland. People we know are living in fear that their homes might still be designated as being part of this MICA problem. So absolutely stand with all the people who are looking for redress. And I think that the Republic of Ireland government and the Housing Minister, Darragh O'Brien, need to sort this out and need to sort it out quickly. It's having a massive impact on people's mental health as well as everything else. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman McClintock. Councillor Michaela Boyd.
Thank you, Mayor. Just thanks to Councillor Duffy for bringing this motion to Council, and delighted I was able to second it. Mayor, the MICA pyrite scandal is not just an opportunity to extend our solidarity with our Donegal neighbours, but to bring further political pressure to bear on the Irish government to provide that 100% redress to those families affected. This is a humanitarian disaster for MICA homeowners unfolding in front of our very eyes. As others have stated, people's homes are no longer safe to live in. With us living so close to the border, we all know people whose homes are falling down around them, too dangerous to live in or to continue to inhabit them. Our motion is calling for Council to offer its full support to those devastated families fighting for recognition and the 100% redress, to enable them to repair or rebuild their crumbling homes. We also express our concern on behalf of citizens of this council area who may be affected but excluded from any form of redress, As others have stated, Mayor, no one should be excluded in terms of redress. I too want to offer my solidarity to those who continue to fight for 100% redress. We applaud the dignity and determination of the Mika campaigners, which has been inspiring to us all. For all of those who have travelled the length and breadth of this country to bring their campaign to where it should be, at the heart of the Irish government, and with the Housing Minister, Dara O'Brien, I would also urge everybody to support this motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Fab Michaela. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for bringing this motion forward, Councillor Duffy. I can't begin to imagine what it must be like for those families and people living in the homes affected by Mika. It's, you know, it really is unimaginable that their homes are crumbling around them. And I like saying my support and solidarity to everyone impacted by this. And you know, I think the movement for 100% redress has been completely excellent, and it's kept, you know, this issue on the agenda. Like the Dáil redress scheme is not fit for purpose at all, and families and homes affected expected to contribute to 10%. Is, you know, it's really unacceptable, and there's been a real failure of the Fianna Fáil-led government for its refusal to take the demands of the people across Donegal for housing justice seriously, and causing, you know, so much of this misery. Like homes facing similar problems because of pyrite elsewhere in the country have been granted 100% redress. So the Mika homes are right to demand that parity with the pyrite homes. Like the people before profit TD Breed Smith, she pointed out in the Dáil that when it came to bailing out the banks, it was done overnight with the stroke of a pen. But when it comes to redressing the people of Donegal for their homes at a fraction of the cost, you know, it's just not possible. It can't be done, and it's typical of the way that ordinary people, you know, seem to be getting treated by the establishment. And you know, again, it's the people power movement that's kept this on the agenda. And I want to say my solidarity to everybody marching on Friday in Dublin. And just to kind of, just was wanting to make an amendment to the motion here, just to send that solidarity from council to the rally in Dublin on Sunday. If that's okay, I can just put this in the chat box here. So I've just put that on there. Thank you.
Have you got a seconder, Councillor O'Neill?
Happy to second it, Chair.
Councillor Gallagher, second. Okay, members. 2 seconds. Okay, thank you for that, Councillor O'Neill. Okay, members, we have amendment on the motion here. Councillor Gallagher, are you happy to talk on the amendment on the motion?
I'll talk about the whole lot of it.
Happy days. Go ahead.
And again, just thanks to Councillor Duffy for bringing this very important motion to council. And I think it's very important that corporate council sends a message that we support the people of Donegal and further afield, because this is just not a Donegal issue. In fact, there are some houses in Strabane affected by this. But I think it's very important, and we send a clear message that what we're supporting is 100% redress. I think there's some myths out there around the Dublin government talking about 90% redress, but that is not factual when it comes down to it. The need for specialist reports, and there's a lot of stuff that is not included in the scheme. So what we need to be talking and we need to be driving forward is it's 100% redress. And I would just like to say that I support this motion 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Councillor Gallagher, Alderman McCready on the amendment. Happy enough to talk on it all?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's good to see you back in the chair. I support the motion and indeed its amendment. It's pretty horrendous when you read a lot of the anecdotes from people, and surprisingly, I've had some correspondence with people reaching out who've been affected, and they are our neighbours in Donegal, and nobody would like to see anybody in this position. It's quite gut wrenching and heartbreaking. So we have full support for this motion, and we'll raise the issue, push where we can, and influence that there is 100% redress put in place. Thanks very much for allowing me in, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman McCready. Councillor Donnelly on the amendment. Happy enough with it all?
Yeah, a whole lot, Chair. Look, happy to support here, and just want to put in record my support. I was there with Councillor Gallagher and others at the Tinnies as people were leaving for protests in Dublin. I was at the rally in Lifford just a few weeks back. It's absolutely devastating to see people who've put their life, who've worked hard all their life and put that, money into building a home, and for it to crumble around them. There was one guy, a Derry fella on media just last week who used his life savings, who worked very, very hard, and he bought a house at auction. His father is unwell, and he was to use this home. The father's in the twilight of his life, and he bought this home so where he could, take his father for retirement. And to be hit with this, it's absolutely devastating. Greed. A lot of this comes down to greed. And again, I just like to express the solidarity, and like to thank also Councillor Duffy for the motion, and express solidarity with all those who are going through this at the minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred. Councillor Donnelly, Alderman Devaney on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in. And look, our party has no problem in supporting the amendment. Anything that puts a belt and braces and gives these homeowners and with young families need all the support they can get. But happy to support the amendment, Mayor.
Okay, members, I don't see any more wanting to talk on the amendment, so I'm going to bring it to a vote now. So if there's anybody against the amendment, could you put it on the chat box or let me know now? Okay, members, that's unanimous. Go back to substantial motion now. I see Alderman Derek Hulsey.
Thank you, Mayor. Now that amendment has been dealt with, I wish to propose a further amendment.
Have you a seconder for this?
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to second this. It's Ryan.
Alderman McCready. Just 2 seconds here, Alderman Hulsey. We're just getting that on the screen now, members.
That's in the 4th paragraph for the Secretariat there.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Alderman Hulsey.
Very, very simple. It's all very well to write to these people, but I think sometimes you need to see the whites of their eyes if you want to put your case forcefully. And I'm listening to the debate. I personally don't know anyone impacted by this, but I can feel and empathise with all of those who have spoken. So I'm suggesting that a better means than writing is to actually seek a meeting with the Republic of Ireland's Housing Minister, Dara O'Brien, and that would be in paragraph 4, the amendment I'm seeking. This council will again write. I'm proposing the amendment. Council will seek a meeting with the Republic of Ireland's Housing Minister to continue to outline our support for the campaign and demand that full redress is provided for all those affected by the scandal. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Alderman. I'll say we're just gonna. Nice. Okay, members, any further members want to speak on the amendment? Okay, members, I don't see anybody on the chat box or on the web, so members, anybody want to state or against the amendment? No one, so that amendment's unanimous. Okay, now go back to substantial motion. Councillor Duffy, do you want to sum up?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to everyone across the virtual chamber for supporting the motion. It is a really important one. I'm quite happy with both amendments as well. They do strengthen it, and particularly around the rally on Friday. I intend to be there, so know that it's good to have that included as well. I know from the report that came out on Friday that the families aren't too confident in terms of getting the 100% that they asked for. So we need to ensure that we are keeping the pressure on and doing everything that we can to keep the media spotlight on this and to keep the pressure on the Housing Minister. So completely appreciate the support today. And just a Councillor Cusack, I as you know, I know Aidan as well, and I've been in contact with him, and it's an awful situation that they're in as well. So look, there's so many broken and heartbroken families out there who have been affected by this. So I just want to thank everybody for their support today. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy, for bringing that. So I'm going to bring this, members, and I don't think we're going to hear anybody against it or abstain against this motion. So the motion amendment is unanimous. Okay, members, moving on to the next motion. Councillor Sina Barr.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the motion, the formal motion.
And have you a seconder? Councillor Riley is happy to second that. Thank you, Councillor Riley. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll take the motion as written on the screen. This motion is in regard to extending workforce monitoring to include other equality grounds such as race, age, and non-Christian religions. At present, Council has a statutory responsibility to monitor the community background and sex of its workforce, but community background only refers to Protestant and Catholic denominations of Christianity. All other faiths, such as Islam, are excluded, along with people who do not align themselves with any organized faith groups. And as a new councillor, I recently went through the council induction process and completed the workforce monitoring forms. To be honest, I found the form quite difficult to complete, and not just because there was no box for dual citizenship or my ethnicity. And it is often said that monitoring is the fundamental building block of equality. A proper system of workforce monitoring allows public authorities to highlight possible inequalities and take remedial action. In relation to services, monitoring lets service providers know which groups are using their services and how satisfied they are with them. They can then consider ways of reaching underrepresented groups and ensure that their services are both relevant and provided fairly. The importance of monitoring in promoting equality can easily be demonstrated by looking at the impact of the fair employment legislation. There have been 3 fair employment statutes in Northern Ireland, and by far the most important was the 1989 Act. The 1989 Act transformed recruitment and selection procedures, discouraged informal recruitment, introduced compulsory workforce monitoring, established the Fair Employment Tribunal to hear and provide a remedy for cases of individual discrimination, and imposed certain duties on employers. Monitoring was only the first step. Once a disparity was identified, individual employers were required to take remedial action by setting goals and timetables to improving the religious balance of their workforce. Northern Ireland has changed dramatically since 1990. Prior to the Good Friday Agreement, a person of color was a reality. Friends tells me that people would sometimes stop and stare at a black person in the street as it was such an unusual occurrence. In Derry and Strabane, an estimated 5,500 people have arrived in the council area over the past decade. And in March 2019, the Labour Force survey estimated there was a total of 105 non-UK born people living in Northern Ireland, reflecting the new diverse culture, and there are now over 70 different languages spoken here. Many of us have chosen to stay for the long term. The direction of travel is more and more towards a very diverse society, and yet monitoring arrangements, which began over 30 years ago in a monocultural environment, have not kept pace with its rapid growth in diversity. For this reason, monitoring must move with the times and reflect the new situation. This has already happened in England, Scotland, and Wales, where monitoring by public authorities, including local councils, was extended to cover gender, race, age, and sexual orientation in 2011. While monitoring can involve both employment and services, initially we are asking council to monitor the workforce, the comparison of applicants, appointees, and employees.
Sorry, member, could you bring your remarks to a close, please?
Sorry, Mayor. Then publish this on an annual basis. It might be useful to note that the Equality Commission has recommended the introduction of ethnic monitoring by all public authorities in Northern Ireland. And finally, it is only fair that our new Black and minority ethnic residents, including those from Eastern Europeans who have chosen to live and work here, should enjoy the same level of protection against discrimination as our long-term established residents. By passing this motion, this council can set a positive example for other local authorities and public bodies to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. Councillor Jackson.
Good Mayor, and Mayor, it's great to see you back in the chair. And we're, on behalf of Sinn Féin, we're happy to support the motion in its entirety. And we welcome the continuing diversity right across this island and the massive contribution of migrant communities to the social and economic life right across the island. When negotiations were taking place around the Good Friday Agreement, we pushed hard for the creation of a Equality Commission, and that was to ensure that all groups have access to equality. We, as a party, we believe strongly in a rights-based society. We're actively working towards creating a new island, an island of equals, and as enshrined within that new island, we see equal rights and equal opportunities to all the citizens should be guaranteed to all. And as we move towards seizing the opportunities that will be brought around by constitutional change on the island, it's incumbent in all levels of government to challenge any inequalities that exist and to make sure that services are accessible to all. So we're completely in support of the motion that's in front of us today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. It's great to be back. Alderman McCready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the mover of this motion, which I, and on behalf of the Ulster Unionist Party, do support. It's moments like these, and it's trying to change things. And for far too long, they kind of, in terms of religion and how we put labels on people, it's generally been Protestant or Catholic, and and that kind of reinforced the binary aspect to how we live in Northern Ireland, the divisions with we live in Northern Ireland. But I do think this motion brings in, it challenges that. It, would certainly, those who don't fall within those religious divides is growing. A large number of young people in particular are more inclined to a secular society, or not necessarily removed from religion, but certainly not as fundamental in how they live their lives, whether that's in employment, in this case, and throughout other aspects of life. And it's only until we get to a point, and certainly, and contrary to Member Jackson's aspirations, that in 100 years I would like Northern Ireland to have an environment where we don't have to annotate these labels. You don't have to determine whether you're what religion you are, what color of skin you are, what your orientation is, because at that point in the next 100 years, it'd be good just to write down that we're all kind of human. It just so happens that we have different views and outlooks and whatever connotations you want to put beside that. But principally and fundamentally, we talk about human rights. Well, we are all human. And if we can agree on that, maybe, Mr. Mayor, we can kind of move forward for Northern Ireland in a more progressive and moderate way. And certainly this I'm happy to support, and indeed on behalf of my party. So great work on the effort and time that went into this one. And, I've spoken to the mover of this motion in person in both capacities, her as a councillor and in her other capacity as head of the Northwest Migrants Forum, of which we've been all sorts of discussions of how we can integrate them further into society. Because frankly, from my point of view, this union, Northern Ireland, or whatever it is that that group determines how they belong to, it is equally theirs as it is equally mine, and we share it. And that's the vein I'd like to just share my contributions to this. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Hope this goes through.
Thank you, Alderman McCready. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Sonoy Barr for bringing this motion forward. I definitely can relate to a lot of what Councillor Sonoy Barr is saying when it comes to the restrictions that these monitoring forms bring. And I often find myself drawing more boxes on these forms, particularly when it comes to the options for gender identity and sexual orientation. And just a wee small note for the motion, I think like sex should be removed because it's gender identity, which is important. So that would be just one amendment to take out sex from the motion. We are living in a much more diverse society, and we continue to be as we grow, the diversity grows as well. And I think you only have to work with young people or know young people to really experience it and learn that. And I know whenever I worked with young people in the Rainbow Project, they always had a saying labels are for jars and not for people. And like that is definitely where we need to get to. But I do understand the importance of good monitoring forms as well, at this moment in time. And but like the narrow labels are definitely very frustrating. And I think the outworking of these more narrow definitions on the person is very much seen at Stormont when you have to identify as either a unionist, a nationalist, or other. And with the veto as well, and this really, unfortunately at the moment, is a reflection of the narrow and sectarian carve up of the North. And I think we really need to be embracing diversity, and we really need to be looking at how we can be much more inclusive and much more broad in the various identities that people have, because I think there's a lot of intersectionality where people are not just one identity, but they're a multitude of identities, and we need to really work towards that full equality, where these forms can be null and void in the future. So People for Profit welcome this motion. There's just that one amendment, if possible, to take out sex whenever the examples are given there.
Thank you for that. Hey, Alderman Corrigan.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in. Mayor, we're content enough with the motion as it stands there, Mayor. No problem with it. As I say, we've all had to fill in the form, so there's no difficulty. If there is something that's seen that could be improved upon, we're content enough in that regard. And as long as we have the option as well for those that there are individuals too who don't like filling in these forms and ticking these boxes, as long as we have the option still whereby they can not participate if that is their choice. So as I say, no problem with it. And again, no problem with if it's deemed appropriate that we set up our own here, as is stated in here, our own monitoring criteria. And if Stormont can get something in place then to update theirs, that's grand. So Mayor, we're content enough to support it, and I don't need to say any more. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Corrigan. It's good to hear them budgets doing well there in the background. Still going.
Well, Mayor, still going well.
Good. Members, I don't see any further speakers, and I'm not hearing any dissenting voices. Is anybody against or want to speak against the motion? Before I do that, I just want to bring Councillor Sino Ibarra to close it off.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all the those who have contributed. I think it is clear with everybody that there is enough support to diversify our workforce, and passing this motion today essentially makes this council the first in the North of Ireland to monitor the composition of its workforce for characteristics other than religion. And by monitoring for ethnicity and other equality categories, it is my belief that this action will ultimately lead to a more diverse workforce, and one which truly reflects our new communities here in the city and surrounding areas. You have done a good thing today, and others might follow this up with actions to improve our scope of monitoring. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Sino Ibarra. I'm not hearing any dissenting voices. Members, the motion passes unanimous. Okay, members, moving on to the next motion. Councillor Turney.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I take the motion as read, please?
And have you a seconder?
Mayor Ryan McCready, I'm happy to second the motion.
Okay. See, sorry, Councillor Riley just came up before you there on the chat box, but doesn't matter. Happy? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Turney.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, the extra £20 a week for universal credit claimants has made a huge difference to people across our council area, which, as we all know, has some of the highest levels of poverty and deprivation of anywhere on these islands. To remove it now when people are still dealing with the effects of the coronavirus pandemic is cruel and, in my opinion, short-sighted. Families have just been hit with the large costs associated with children returning to school, and we're just months away from Christmas. This cut could not have come at a worse time. People are being faced with difficult decisions and wondering how they can heat their home or put food on their table. The British government aren't going to do anything to protect the people of Derry and Strabane. Therefore, we need to take action into our own hands. The SDLP fought hard to ensure that we'd have control over our welfare powers when others wanted to hand them to the Tories. Tonight, I am calling on all councillors here to use their voice and send a message to the Tories to stand up for universal credit claimants and to support this motion, which is against the cut. £20 a week could be the difference of some families between having to skip meals and being able to buy clothes for their children. The £20 a week universal credit uplift was introduced to help benefit claimants struggling during the coronavirus pandemic, and it will be removed by the British government at the beginning of this month. This has been described as the biggest overnight benefit cut since World War II. Every claimant will lose out on £1,040 a year. And it comes at a time, Mr. Mayor, when people are facing numerous financial pressures, including rising utility costs, general increases in the price of living, the end of furlough, and with national insurance contributions set to rise next year. As of May 2021, the North had over 134,000 universal credit claimants. To retain the uplift would cost £140 million annually, or £55.5 million for the rest of this financial year. This figure is less than 1% of the funding provided to the North as part of the British government's block grant. And as the British government and the Prime Minister Boris Johnson have refused calls to U-turn on this issue, the SDLP is calling on the Executive and Stormont to give it back to people by finding the £55.5 million needed to allow the uplift to be retained for the rest of this financial year. Mr. Mayor, £20 may not seem a lot to a lot of people, but what does £20 actually look like? It looks like 2 packets of pasta, a 5-pack of bananas, cooked ham, sausage casserole mix, sausages, strawberry jam, rice, snap cereal, broccoli, 4 carrots, a large chicken, minced beef, 2 loaves of bread, a garlic baguette, butter, 2 litres of milk, tea bags, coffee, peppers, 2 onions, potatoes, and pasta sauce. Imagine someone coming and taking that out of your kitchen. Not one of us on this meeting would stand for it, and we shouldn't allow the British government to do it either. So in the absence of action from the British government, Mr Mayor, I am asking this council to call on the Sinn Féin Communities Minister Deirdre Hargey to work with her party colleague and executive colleague, Finance Minister Conor Murphy, to uphold the £20 a week for the remainder of this financial year and to commit to a long-term strategy to tackle poverty and social deprivation across Derry and Strabane. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Alderman McClathy.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me in, and thank you to Councillor Tierney for bringing this notice of motion before us today. People are worried sick about this £20 a week being taken off them. It's having a massive effect on people's health. As a furlough scheme winds down, as national insurance contributions go up, as energy costs go up, people are really worried about how they're really exasperated about how they're going to manage. And I think Councillor Tierney's breakdown of what £20 means to people shows £20 is a heck of a lot of money to a lot of people who are in desperate need. And of course, our own council area is particularly badly affected, where we have 1 in 4 children already living in poverty. What I would say is that our MPs, Jim Shannon and Carla Lockhart, have been focal in Westminster arguing the case for the for the universal credit payment to be kept up for people. And our MLA, Gary Middleton, as well, has been very focal, saying that this money needs to be retained, and that in the absence of the Westminster government and Boris Johnson cutting this amount of money, that our executive have got to find the money. And it does lie with Deirdre Hargey and Conor Murphy. Unfortunately, whenever the DUP were arguing the case at Westminster, Sinn Féin, of course, were not there, so they left people voiceless at Westminster. But I think they have to remedy that. They can't duck the responsibilities at Stormont. This amount of money is a lifeline to people, and we need to find a way of reinstating this for at least this financial year until until it can be further looked at for longer term strategy. So very happy to go with this notice of motion to support it fully today, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman McClathy. Councillor Jackson.
Mayor, I'm going to pose an amendment to the motion. I've put it in the chat box there. The amendment replaces the final paragraph. Well, the amendment should read, following the council calls on the communities minister, and then they insert the text that's in the chat box.
Mr. Jackson, would you have a seconder for the amendment?
Happy to second, Mayor. Sandra.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Okay.
Do you want me to go ahead, or do you want to wait until it's up on the screen?
Just get up on the screen first here, 2 seconds. Go ahead there, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to start by saying that I'm in complete agreement. We're in complete agreement that £20 per week may seem as a paltry sum to a Tory cabinet of millionaires, but to many families, it makes all the difference in terms of their children going hungry and being kept warm. And we believe that the British government are under pressure, and we need to maintain that pressure. There should only be one message coming out of this council this evening, and it should be putting the focus and keeping the pressure on the British government. We believe that when we're challenging these cruel cuts, that we should be speaking in one voice, and it is disappointing to see that there's political point scoring around what is a very serious issue affecting so many people right across our council area. And one of the things that that we're certain of is that Boris Johnson will be delighted that the attention has been shifted off him and put on and put elsewhere. So that's something that we believe that we need to maintain the focus where it lies. But in the same token, as a party, we recognise and we have recognised that there are a lot of people struggling, and as a party and the minister in question, in terms of Deirdre Hargey and the finance minister Conor Murphy, have put in mitigation packages totaling well over £500 million to offset the worst impacts of Tory austerity, and that's something we're immensely proud of. And I know Conor Murphy was out today again, giving his indication that all options will be explored to ensure or to try and mitigate in any way we can. But it shouldn't, as a council, we shouldn't take the focus off this Tory government.
Councillor Jackson, you bring your remarks to a close there, please.
Well, I think the amendment is self-explanatory, and we believe that they keep the pressure on the Tories. We need to be singing with the one voice in terms of this. So I just ask members to support the amendment that's before us today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Members, we have an amendment on the floor. Next in line is Councillor Hargan. Do you want to speak on the amendment?
Hi Mayor, how you doing? So I've got my own amendment to introduce. So I would like to speak on this amendment, but then will I be able to introduce my own amendment later?
Yep, that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, look, as everybody has said, the universal credit cut is vicious, unnecessary. It's actually evil, and will do a tremendous amount of damage to people already struggling across our society, workers and the vulnerable. So we have to do everything we can to stop it from happening. And I think we have to commend the community organisations, the trade unions, the ordinary people who've been campaigning, signing petitions, marching, protesting to try and stop this, the Tories from doing this. And unfortunately, the Tories have not responded. They are ploughing ahead with these plans. And to be honest, I don't think that the Stormont executive has done enough. I know that there's a lot of concern that we're hearing tonight from parties that have propped up the Tories, from parties that have been okay with the implementation of vicious welfare reforms in the past, but it's not enough. So we don't support this amendment. We think if the Tories refuse to do a U-turn, the Stormont should step up. It should protect people. There's no point talking about an anti-poverty strategy if it doesn't start this week to protect people from this cut. The cost is doable, and whenever elites are looking for money, it's always found. So it should be found to protect ordinary people in our society. So we are 100% backing the call for the Stormont executive to find the funding if the Tories refuse to do a U-turn. And Jerry Carroll has argued this on the floor of the Assembly. I think if the executive can't protect people right now, what's the point of all the concern? So I think we have to up the pressure on the executive. I think on behalf of our people in this district, I think we have to send that message back to the executive. that we can't allow this vicious cut to go through, and we have to do everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen. So we're not in support of the amendment that takes out that proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hargan. Councillor Gallagher, do you want to speak on the amendment?
Chair, I'll speak about on the whole. Like a previous speaker, I think that when Stormont has got something to brag about, it brags about it. So I think that Stormont needs to take responsibility, and this is something that needs to take responsibility for. So I think it should be concluded in this motion from a corporate position that people, like people in Strabane, are badly affected by this removal of £20. And like others have said, some people might think, aye, £20 is a whole lot, but when it comes down to when you're living on the breadline, £20 is a massive amount of money. And what I'd also like to remind people here in this virtual chamber, this is not an extra £20. It's not. When universal credit was introduced, it was £20 less than the legacy benefits. So you're not asking for nothing extra. It is on a level par with the other legacy benefits. So it should be easy to bring universal credit up to the same level as other benefits. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Turney on the amendment.
Yep, Chair, thank you for allowing me on. Chair, the SDLP won't be supporting the amendment. Some of the reasons from the two previous speakers. I think the amendment completely takes the responsibility away from the executive. As I said in my opening remarks whenever I was presenting the motion, I don't believe, and I've said it many times in this chamber before, I don't believe that any British minister is going to try and protect the people of Derry and Strabane. They've nothing to gain from it at all. But I believe the executive have an opportunity to do it. What we're asking for is the executive to provide £55.5 million for the end of this financial year to keep this uplift. If they want to do that and then continue to liaise with executive colleagues and the Scottish Government and Welsh Assembly, I'm happy to do that. But as Alderman McClintock had said, MPs have been doing this in Westminster. The British government aren't listening. They're not going to listen. The executive could, and I welcome the fact that Conor Murphy, the finance minister, came out this morning and basically said that the executive would see what they could do to try and get this money. So for those reasons, Chair, we cannot support the amendment that's before us. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Turney. Alderman Devaney on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in and in consideration of the amendment. Our party will not be supporting the amendment. We were definitely in support of the substantive motion just before that, but will not be supporting the amendment, Chair.
Thank you for that, Alderman Devaney. Okay, members, I'm going to take it to a vote. Sorry, members, I have one more on here. Alderman McCready, looking to come on the amendment?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. We will not be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, members, could we pass on by default?
Thank you, Mayor. Members for and against the amendment from Councillor Jackson. Alderman Alan Breslin.
Against.
Alderman Morris Devaney.
Against.
Alderman Guy.
Against.
Alderman Hussey.
Against.
Alderman Keith Kerrigan.
Against.
Alderman McCready. Sorry, Alderman McClintock. Beg your pardon, Alderman McClintock.
Against.
Alderman McCready.
Against.
Alderman Ramsey.
Against.
Alderman Wark,
Against.
Councillor Jason Barr absent, Councillor Raymond
Against,
Barr.
sorry.
Oh, sorry, Jason Barr. Sorry, thank you. Councillor Raymond Barr is absent. Councillor John Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
For.
Councillor Carr.
Against.
Councillor Cusack.
Against.
Councillor Dobbins.
Against.
Councillor Donnelly.
Against.
Councillor Emmett Doyle is absent. Councillor Duffy.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Farrell.
Against.
Councillor Ferguson is absent. Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Gallagher.
Against.
Councillor Harkin. Councillor Heaney has apologies. Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Kelly is absent. Councillor Logue.
For.
Councillor McGinley.
For.
Councillor Mooney. Councillor Mooney.
McGuire for.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Mooney against and Councillor Maguire is now present. He's for. I have Councillors McHugh, McKeever and McKinney all absent. And Councillor McHugh is now present for.
Yeah.
Councillor McKeever and McKinney still absent. I have apologies from Councillor Mullen. Councillor O'Neill.
Against.
Councillor Riley.
Against.
Councillor Sinoy Barr.
Against.
And Councillor Tierney.
Against.
Thank you. So, Mayor, that is 8 for the amendment and 24 against, so the amendment falls.
Thank you for that fault to the amendment with Councillor Jackson falls. Okay, members, Councillor Hargan looking to come in with a further amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, if you can speak to that, or does it need a second?
Just give us 2 seconds. Let's hear. We'll get this up on.
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Hargan, looking at this here, the motion that Councillor Attorney brought on is looking at universal credit. This is absolutely taking it everywhere, so it is. So I'm not allowing this to come on. It would be a motion on itself.
Right, Chair, Mayor, I don't understand your logic. Can you explain why this can't come in? It's clearly connected to the matter at hand.
The Councillor, or I'm going to bring in the city solicitor here.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry. Standing Order 17.1 deals with amendments, and it specifically states that an amendment must relate solely to the proposal which it seeks to amend and not be in effect a new proposition on a different matter, and must not place a greater responsibility on the meeting than the original proposal. So, Mayor, as you indicated there, Councillor Tierney's motion is specifically confined to the issue of universal credit, whereas this amendment is seeking to deal with the entire welfare system. So it would be therefore broader and effectively a new proposition on a different matter and a greater responsibility than the original proposal. So on those grounds, Mayor, it would fall. It is something which could be brought forward as a separate notice of motion in due course to a future council meeting.
Thank you for that, Bob. Okay, members, go back to the original motion of Councillor Turner. I see no more speakers. Councillor Turner, do you want to come on?
Yep, Chair, I'm happy to.
Sorry. Apologies for time. Councillor Jackson.
Chair, Mayor, I wanted to speak on the original motion, but I just see that
there's another amendment coming
Hussey's
on.
got another amendment, so.
Right,
I'll give
okay.
it to Alderman Hussey.
Okay. Alderman Hussey. 3 seconds to put this further amendment on.
Mayor, listening to the last judgment, I suspect this may fall on the same stool.
Interested. If you give us 2 seconds here.
Okay.
Alderman Hussey, you're always right and you're correct in this one. It does.
I just want to say that, I mean, what we're talking about here is universal credit, and we're talking about the impact of the £20 being withdrawn. And my amendment is looking at dealing with that impact. So I would ask the city solicitor to reconsider that because it does arise directly from the motion.
As the same with Councillor Hargan's, Alderman Hussey, it'll be taken away from the original motion. So what I'm going to do, members, I'm going to move on now to the original motion. I think Councillor Jackson wanted to comment on that.
Yes, Mayor, and we in Sinn Féin we're happy to support the original motion now, and we're obviously disappointed that our amendment has wasn't passed at today's meeting. But it was interesting to hear some speak around our recognising and acknowledging that British ministers won't protect the people of Derry and Strabane, and that's something that we've been saying loud and clear for a long time, and we were repeatedly told by one party that they could deliver in Westminster. Now on this issue, it seems that they're openly conceding that they can't. But see, the issue of the £20 universal credit payment is far too serious, and we acknowledge that there needs to be protections put in place, but we also acknowledge that there's budgetary pressures right across. Our mental health services are in crisis. There's a crisis in terms of waiting list, and then we look at the pay for public sector workers, including our health workers. There's major pressures, and it's sad that there's some within this chamber that want to let the Tories off the hook in that regard. But we acknowledge that this £20 universal credit uplift was an essential uplift. It was put on for a reason, because families were struggling, and we would like to see that being mitigated against in any way possible. So in that regard, we're supportive of the original motion. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Hargan.
Thank
on
you,
the
Mayor.
original.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I mean, people will have seen today the Pandora Papers basically exposing how billionaires, world leaders are hiding their wealth And this has been an argument about fraud, has been a big argument about cracking down on people and benefits, and that drove the Tory reforms that has basically left our communities devastated and are built on a pack of lies. And look, it's not lost on us to hear the DUP and here today, on the front foot, appearing to care about ordinary people across our society when they've propped up the Tories, when they've defended the Tories down the line in terms of their vicious welfare reforms, as have other parties over the last 15, 20 years, as we've seen the welfare system destroyed. So we believe that the Stormont protecting people now should be a first step to getting rid of the entire welfare system that we have here in the north that punishes people and that has let people down. And I think there's no defence of it, and we have devolved powers. And so defending this uplift right now should be the first step to undoing the whole welfare system that doesn't treat people properly. So we would like to see this as the beginning of a full break with a Tory approach. And that's what people expect, and that's what people want to see. And so we'll obviously be in support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hargan. Alderman Devaney.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in. And look, once again, just put on our record that we will be supporting the notice of motion coming forward here. We think it's vitally important that this £20 is retained. And as Alderman McClintock has said, our party have been raising the issue in Westminster where it needs to be raised, and our MLA for Foyle, Gary Middleton, has been raising it very vocally, and he was on the radio earlier on today speaking on it. But just to say, Mayor, we'll be supporting the notice of motion.
Thank you, Alderman Devaney. Alderman McCready, you put on the substantive motion. It's where I moved on from that. I'd be happy for Councillor Hargan, Councillor Hulsey to come on with a motion later on the month on this, and as the city solicitor said, their amendments were taking it away. So if it is on a substantial motion, which you request on the chat box, and that will only take up, but is it on the original motion of Councillor Turney's?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The substantive motion as it is now, can you confirm that's what I'm reading on the screen, please? Thanks.
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, no issue. So we support the motion, and frankly, quite a good debate around it there. It's interesting to see sometimes when you mention it's not about politics or politicking or protecting ministers, evidently to the contrary in this case. And let me be clear, Mr. Mayor, myself, my party colleagues, we've got no problem calling out any minister at any case, because we do that on behalf of our constituents. And I understand that there's been a culture within all parties to kind of protect their ministers at all costs. Frankly, we have to be just clear and concise and be brutally honest with people when we represent them. In this particular case here, and in the future, it may go slightly different against the minister, which I may be affiliated to politically, but they're there as ministers for everyone. They're not ministers for one particular party. They're ministers for everyone in this country and this council area in particular. So, and that's why we voted against a lot of the amendments and stuff. But as it stands at the moment, the core of the issue is being lost. £20 highlighted by Member Tierney, and that does bring it to home and articulate exactly how it affects people day in, day out. And something does need done about it. And, in one case you could say, it's a Westminster issue. Not good enough. We, Mr. Mayor, our politicians here with the devolution and with Stormont must put in that last line of defence mechanism, which we do have the power to do. We just need to get on and do it. And Mr. Mayor, thanks for letting me in. Cheers.
Thank you for that, Alderman McCready. Okay, members, I don't see any more dissenting voices. And could you bring Councillor Turney on now to close it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank everyone for their contribution. As Alderman McCready said, I think we had a good discussion around a very, very important issue. I would have no problem in agreeing with Alderman McClintock when she says that people in Derry and Strabane are worried about this cut. I have been dealing with people today who are really, really worried about what this cut actually means for them. And I've no doubt that I will deal with more people, and so will a lot of my colleagues on this call over the coming weeks and months. But Mr. Mayor, I want to make a point and point out that this motion was never about political point scoring, which has been referenced by one of the speakers. And I also want to make the point very, very clearly that the SDLP are conceding nothing. Our MPs have been raising this in Westminster and will continue to raise this in Westminster when given the opportunity. That's their job. And when they were elected, they made a pledge, particularly the MP for this city, to the people of this city, that he would take the fight to the Tories. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's not standing outside on the grass with fake outrage. And we are providing a way and an alternative right here in the north to mitigate against this cut for the rest of this financial year. As I've said, it's 1% of the budget that the executive get, and I think it's doable. And I'm glad that people are now joining our call this evening to call on the Communities Minister and the Finance Minister to work together to find the £55.5 million to protect people right across the north who are going to be suffering from this cut. But all in all, Mr. Mayor, I thank people for their contribution this far. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turney, for that. Members, I don't hear anybody against that motion. If there is anybody against it, could you highlight now on the chat box or let me know? Okay, members, the motion for Councillor Turney is unanimous. Members, moving on now, the next motion is Councillor Bobbins to move.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'll take it as read.
Okay, have you, and Councillor Riley is happy to second that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, not every disability is visible. How many of us have entered a toilet cubicle and have had to negotiate sideways past a toilet paper holder just to close the cubicle door behind us? How many of us have tried to undress to go to the loo without banging our elbows off the cubicle walls? How many of us have left it a wee bit too late to empty our bladders, or have had a tummy bug and needed to go to the loo in a hurry and had to go through all these scenarios I've just mentioned? A lot of us, if we were honest. For a very high percentage of the public, this is a way of life, particularly those living with hidden disabilities. Because of the stigma and misunderstanding surrounding invisible conditions, people are suffering in silence and being discriminated against for trying to use accessible toilets. I'm not going to bore you with statistics, except to say that 1 in 7 are living with an invisible condition. MS, autism, COPD, to name a few, and I'm only scratching the surface. But I'd like to highlight Crohn's disease and colitis. One of the main symptoms, and by no means the only one, is a frequent and urgent need to use the toilet. These lifelong diseases don't just affect the gut, they can affect other physical attributes and many parts of life itself, from education and work to relationships and mental health. In most cases, surgery is required and includes constructing the stoma and attaching an ileostomy and colostomy bag to collect digestive waste. And from these bags, leakage can occur. Many people with a stoma need to kneel on the floor of a toilet to empty their stomach bag. People with Crohn's or colitis and other invisible conditions can outwardly look well and do not meet some people's perceptions of how a disabled person should look like. 1 or 2 people with hidden disabilities have had negative experiences from members of the public just for using an accessible toilet, including verbal and physical abuse. Many feel that they are being judged and seen as not entitled to use these facilities. In fairness, some people who challenge healthy-looking people for using accessible toilets think they're standing up for the rights of disabled people. A lot of the issue is around the preconception of what somebody with disabilities actually looks like. The experience or fear of bowel incontinence is, as you can imagine, very undermining to a person's confidence and their self-esteem, and can lead to an actual fear of leaving the safety of their home, and this leads to isolation. I believe that education is the key. Through changing accessible toilet signage and training staff, we as a council are challenging the stigma. Accessibility is about much more than wheelchair access. It is important that a more inclusive approach to accessibility is developed. Simple things like signage make such a difference and are a really important step in redefining the stereotypes around disability. The signs placed on accessible toilet doors will urge staff and customers to remember not all disabilities are visible. They are intended to make people with conditions like Crohn's and like colitis feel that they can use disabled facilities without facing criticism from others, and will help take the stigma away from those who may need to use such toilets for reasons other than having a mobility impairment. A person with an impairment or medical condition can experience loads of barriers in their everyday lives. We can't allow the call of nature to be one of them. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dobbins. Alderman Currigan.
You, Mayor, for allowing me in. And Mayor, I do thank Councillor Dobbins for bringing the proposal forward. Mayor, I know a number of constituents with Crohn's, know a number of people there with that, and to be fair, I didn't know as many with colitis. No point telling you any different. And since reading the motion and seeing it brought forward, done a wee bit of research into it and taken a look on through, and do you have to say it's a very good website, the Crohn's and Colitis UK website, and gives you a lot more information on it. And it is a subject, you know, anything I suppose to do with bowel movements and all that, people are embarrassed, and it's something that's sort of hidden away and not spoken about. And you know, I do welcome Councillor Dobbins bringing this here, and it's a thing that's got to be dealt with and dealt with appropriately. And definitely, I think it's excellent that she's brought it. And there are so many. Those are to name two there, but there are so many other invisible conditions that are there, and anything we can do about that would be good. And do note she asked there that we seek advice from Crohn's and Colitis UK and other organisations and information, and that would be one I would be mind would be very useful for members to get something in that regard, that we could see the situation with it. Because I mean, it's not as has been stated there, as a hidden ailment. You don't see that person. Someone has a difficulty and they're in a wheelchair, you see that they're in a wheelchair. With the likes of these conditions, you don't remark that. I mean, it was only when I was going through and looking into this, I remarked that Sir Steve Redgrave, you know, five-time gold medal rower for the Great Britain team, has diagnosed with colitis. And you know, he's been able to continue with that. I didn't know that. You see this information, so no, fully support Councillor Dobbins, and thank her very much for bringing this. And again, we do have the issue again with toilets and throughout the council, because I mean, we do have the difficulty as well that currently we still have a number of our facilities that are closed, and some of them may not open again. So we do have that difficulty. And again, signage has been a thing that we have referenced on many occasions there, with the likes of, I'm going local here, going out to Castleberg, and with the public toilets being demolished. You know, I know there are 4 businesses there that are in the community toilet scheme, but it's getting signage that people know which ones are, and getting that signage and better highlighted so that people know. You know, so no, fully support the motion, and thank Councillor Dobbins for bringing it in. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that. Councillor Michaela Boyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Dobbins for bringing this motion to the floor this afternoon? A very deserving motion it is, and my party will be supporting this motion. I am delighted that we are helping to break the stigma for those who suffer from Crohn's and colitis, irritable bowel, urinary tract infections, and conditions that are associated with the bowel and kidneys that need to have access to accessible toilets. Those who suffer these horrendous illnesses throughout their daily life, be it at work, socialising or planning a journey, need the reassurance of knowing that there is an accessible toilet and it is detrimental to their health and well-being. A toilet with relevant signage in place, people will have the confidence in visiting more of our public buildings and places, knowing that they can have access to a toilet. Living with Crohn's and colitis is a problem that affects the immune system, that causes attack on the digestive system with abnormal gut bacteria. This causes flare-ups and can affect people's work life, education and social life. So access to toilets and proper signage, not just in public buildings, but within the wider spectrum of hospitality and retail, all does need to be addressed, particularly for people with profound disabilities and learning disabilities, to give them all the dignity they need when accessing these facilities. I was delighted when the Minister Conor Murphy recently launched the consultation on proposals to introduce requirements for the fitting of changing places toilet facilities in our buildings, and I want to commend our council for the work that they have been doing with our public buildings in this regard, meeting the needs of people to allow them to actively participate fully in life. However, that said, as part of the consultation, I do believe those with hidden disabilities like Crohn's and colitis should be catered for with the relevant signage in place in buildings. The consultation should not exclude this group. We support the motion brought by Councillor Dobbins here this afternoon. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Michaela Boyle. Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Mayor. And this is such an important issue, and People Before Profit fully supports this motion. We not only do we need signage on toilets, but we also need more public toilets and more accessible toilets. Councillor Dobbins had described how toilets were poorly designed, and this is happening everywhere. Even some of the toilets in the hospital have been very poorly designed, and this is where we need to include people with disabilities in the design process to ensure that these toilets are truly accessible for all. Because when we do this, when we have multiple public toilets that are accessible and supportive of people with all disabilities, hidden disabilities and visible disabilities, that enables people then to access our public services, access our town and city centres, and it enables people to get out, and that then enables them to be much healthier. And there's Crohn's and colitis are can be very, very debilitating. And Councillor Dobbins had mentioned other conditions and things as well, and the services to support people living with these conditions is incredibly important, and incontinence would also be a very important issue, which would come under this banner. And the incontinence services, particularly in terms of the physiotherapy management of people with incontinence, the services really need to expand and grow, because there's a lot more people living with these conditions that are actually accessing these services. And Councillor Dobbins had talked about the judgment of people with hidden disabilities accessing toilets, and toilets should be in a judgment-free zone. And the same applies for when trans people access toilets. Again, there's stigma and judgment placed on trans people, and really this awareness raising is so important, and education is really, really key to take away judgment from toilets. So if this is something which can affect everybody, it's this is a practical step to supporting people with this condition, but we still, I think, need to really look at developing our toilets, working with people with disabilities, and designing more toilets, and really have a good look at how how our towns and city centres are planned, which enables people to access them in a way that they can access toilets when they need it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Neil. Alderman Guy.
Mayor, for letting me in. And we in the Ulster Unionist Party totally agree with this motion brought forward by Councillor Dobbins. Such measures for provision of accessible toilets for all those with hidden disabilities is long overdue. Speaking from personal experience, a family member who suffers badly with colitis and has done for many, many years, I know how embarrassing it can be for her when she's out and about, finding a proper toilet. She never would go on the disabled toilet because she feels that there's a stigma there attached to that. And when I always say to her that she should be using it, she should be, but she doesn't, and suffers in silence and suffers with pain until she gets home again. So I think it's congratulate Angela on bringing this forward, and hopefully it'll not be too long before we see the signage on those disabled accessible toilets. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that, Alderman Guy. Members, I don't see any more dissenting voices on this, so I'm going to bring Mr. Dobbins in now to close it off.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I would like to thank everyone for their support. I, like a number of fellow councillors and council staff, have a hidden disability of one form or the other. We shouldn't be expected to hang a sign, be expected to have a sign around our neck stating such, or can I even say a lapel badge as an indicator. And I very much welcome future steps by this council to change the mindset of many to the fact that not all disabilities are visible. The supermarket, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Asda have all the signage up already, and the Northwest Regional College are in discussions at the moment to make way for their accessible toilets more accessible. Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you, Councillor Dobbins. Members, I don't hear anybody against the motion. Anybody against, or state against the motion? Could you put on the chat box? Let me know now. Okay. Motion on behalf of Councillor Dobbins passes unanimous. Well done, Angela. Members, moving on now to Alderman Ramsey.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Take the motion as read. Just have a seconder.
I'll second it, Mayor. Alderman Devaney.
Alderman Devaney.
Thank
Go ahead,
you.
Alderman Ramsey.
Well, thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the family members I've been speaking to, and also Kenny Donaldson of the victims group SEF. There have been instances recently when motions brought before Council have produced and revealed divisions that are counterproductive to the accountability members carry for making this council area a place which we wish to see prosper and where all are welcomed, valued and included. The recent debate on funding for the 50th commemoration of the events of 30th of January 72 has been an example. No one wishes to detract from the loss and suffering which occurred in the city in 1972. There can be no defence. Deputy First Minister Michelle O'Neill MLA says every mummy's tears are the same. I want to add to that. Therefore, there can be no hierarchy of victims, and none should be forgotten or have their suffering diminished. A young child in Claudy, an innocent woman collecting census forms, is as valuable to her family as the victims of 30th of January 1972, as indeed were all those killed and injured in the weeks and days prior to that day. During many debates, I think of my friends like Mervyn Bell, Gary Lynch, Sesame Knight, and family member Bert Slater. Their families' tears were no different, and the pain of injustice to this day remains. These were all victims of the IRA. There have been no convictions, amnesty by default. When I say this, we enter into a realm where motives and thinking becomes skewed to balancing the body count. This is no way to deal with the past or related funding for support. This motion notes that instances of injustice are not exclusive to any one community or section of any one community, and urges that in addressing such issues, we take the opportunity to promote reconciliation
healing and transformation, inclusivity, equality, parity of esteem, partiality, and avoid debates becoming partisan or contentious. When addressing the decade of centenaries, we adopted a model which points a way forward. I propose, therefore, and ask support for this motion as tabled to establish a working group to consider and consult on appropriate policy criteria and approve an inclusive policy to ensure that any matters dealing with the legacy of the past and associated activities or initiatives will be fully compliant with that policy when agreed. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Ramsey. Councillor Duffy.
Mayor, I submitted an amendment last week to the member services. Can that be shared?
Give us 2 seconds and that's all, Councillor Duffy. One minute here, members. Sorry about that, members. Is the amendment on that now? That doesn't hold. I'm going to pass you on to the city solicitor here.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor, the issue is that an amendment can't be a direct negative of the motion. Now, the motion that is in front of us has really only got the one operative part, which is the last paragraph, which this motion seeks to delete. So whilst there wouldn't be any issue in relation to the various additions to the motion which have been suggested in relation to it, as it's currently presented with the deletion of that last paragraph, it would be a negative of the motion, and therefore it just couldn't be accepted, I'm afraid, Mayor.
Mayor, can I come in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Phil. Go ahead there,
Yeah.
Councillor Duffy.
Yeah. Thank you, Philip. Would I have permission to submit a further amendment? To amend my amendment, so to speak. Could I keep the first bit of it in terms of all parties?
Councillor Duffy, if you take off that last amendment off the table then, and then
Yeah.
put you will through, okay? On the
I'm happy to just to keep the last paragraph of the motion and just have that first bit of the amendment done, if that's handier than me typing it all out again.
So, Mayor, just to confirm, is that then keeping the amendment as it is, but also then not deleting that paragraph
Yes.
which says,
Yes.
yep, so that, and that's
Yep.
effectively withdrawing the current amendment, but adding that as a new amendment, effectively.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
Councillor Duffy, do you want to go ahead and speak on that?
Yeah, I probably need a seconder, Mayor, just.
I'll
Right.
second that, Mayor.
Councillor Jackson, second. Go ahead there, Councillor Duffy.
Okay, Gurmugget, Mayor. Sinn Féin broadly welcomed the motion by Alderman Ramsey and the DUP, and particularly acknowledge his statement regarding the fact that there should be no hierarchy of victims. I brought this amendment as I believe that the opposition of all parties, the Irish Government, the European Human Rights Commissioner and the UN rapporteurs to the legacy proposals outlined in the British Government's command paper on the 14th of July must be noted within the motion. The deaths and injuries caused in Claudia in July 1972 were appalling, and they should not have happened. I stood in the Guildhall Square last Saturday with many families who have been bereaved through the conflict here. I watched and listened to each family give an account of their loved one and their continued fight for truth and justice, a fight that has continued for over 50 years for some. A moving and inspiring event, one of many held throughout this island and with more planned in the coming months. The previous policies of successive British governments have failed. Their policy of deny, delay and death hasn't stopped families in their pursuit of truth and justice, and nothing ever will. All of the families of those who died or were injured deserve and are entitled to the truth about what happened to their loved ones. We must collectively increase our efforts to heal the deep hurt and build on the success of our peace process. The stalling must end. The cover-up on the British state's role in the conflict must end. The British Government has a responsibility to implement the Stormont House Agreement, fund the legacy inquest and ensure the Police Ombudsman's Office has adequate resources. The families of the victims deserve no less. The British and Irish governments were parties to that agreement and have a responsibility to ensure its implementation in order to meet the needs of victims. What the British Tory government is proposing now is a policy so right-wing that it would make Pinochet blush, a policy whose only aim is to protect the interests of British soldiers, to give them the cover of murdering with impunity on the streets of Derry. We will not stand for it, and the families will not stand for it. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Attorney on the amendment.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I'm happy to address both, if that's okay with yourself. Yeah, thank you. Mayor, on behalf of the SDLP, we're happy to support the amendment and the original motion, which we were going to support anyway. I'm pretty sure, Mr. Mayor, that many SDLP representatives down the years have condemned the actions and what happened in Claudia in July 1972. And I today want to add my voice to that list. What happened in Claudy in July 1972 was wrong, and it shouldn't have happened. I welcome this motion, and I look forward to seeing the rollout of it within council. I particularly look at the line, in view of this, council recognises that the impact of the past is not exclusive to any community or group. And I wholeheartedly agree with that statement, Mr. Mayor. The past and what happened on the streets of this city and on the streets of the north over what has now been called the Troubles was absolutely shocking, and there's no other way to describe it. Many of those events, whether we like it or not, have shaped many of us and have shaped our communities and the journey that our communities have travelled on for a long number of years. Mr. Mayor, probably like most on this meeting, I wasn't alive in 1972, but the impact of what happened on the streets of the city in 1972, may it be in Claudy or may it be in the Bogside, have shaped the person that I am. And that is trying to make sure that those violent scenes that were witnessed by our fathers and grandfathers are never witnessed by anyone on the streets of this city ever again. That takes me, Mr. Mayor, to the line where it states, it is incumbent on council to secure adherence to working towards reconciliation. Absolutely. Every one of us as political representatives and political leaders within our communities and right across the city and district should be leading our communities to that reconciled place. We should be looking forward to living equally side by side together, nationalist, unionist, and everybody else who calls this place home. That is the how and where I want, and my colleagues within the SDLP want to take this city and district to. And I welcome the fact that we are now debating this notice of motion and how we are going to see the rollout of this within the working group that is to be established if this motion is carried, and how we can encourage people within our communities to travel that road to reconciliation. Like Councillor Duffy, I attended the protest at the Guildhall last Saturday. I listened to families who I have come to know in my role as a political representative. Some of the testimonies and some of the impact of the actions and the loss of life that they have suffered was heart-wrenching to hear. And many of those incidents, Mr. Mayor, took place on 50 years ago. And those families still haven't got truth and still haven't got justice. And it is incumbent on all of us to work together. I support Alderman Ramsey when he says that there should be no hierarchy of victims, and there absolutely should not be. The loss of a unionist or loyalist is equal to the loss of a nationalist or a Republican, in my view, and that's the way it should be. And I know Alderman Ramsey quoted the Deputy First Minister when she said, "No mummy's tears are any different," and that's true. The loss of life that we have seen on the streets of this city over many, many years is absolutely, totally and absolutely wrong. And I look forward to the rollout of this motion where we can hopefully build and show our community that we as council are heading towards that reconciled place, and ask people to get on board along with us, because it's through that, Mr. Mayor, that we will see a happier people in the Derry City and Strabane District Council area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Attorney. Alderman McClantic on the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. And I suppose my party colleague has spoken and brought the motion before us, so I won't go into the details of it. I suppose I'm content to say that we are happy with the amendment. Alderman Ramsey has very clearly said, and I'm encouraged to hear others saying as well, that there absolutely cannot be a hierarchy of victims. There has to be truth and justice for all. And I suppose over the years, we as a council here in this area have led the way in reconciliation. I think in recent days we have somewhat lost that that lead that we did have. And unlike Councillor Tierney, I was very much alive and about in 1972. I can still remember the heartbreak of that year. And now as we come to a very poignant time, the 50th anniversary of so many events, and that was the bloodiest year, I believe, of our history, which is not a an accolade that we really would want to have. But as we come to remembering during this 50 years, I think we have to remember to give respect to everybody, to remember that so many families are hurting. And when they see one particular atrocity being highlighted over another, that actually just opens the wounds for them again. So I think, as we have led the way in reconciliation in the past, I think that the way forward for us is to establish a working group to consider just how we go forward and how we make sure that the legacy of the past is compliant with the values that we have within this council. And I think that the amendment by Councillor Duffy, I actually think we're all agreed that the legacy proposals that have been outlined by the British government are not acceptable. And thank you, Mayor, for letting me in on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Alderman McConaughey. Councillor Hargan on the amendment. Councillor Hargan.
Yeah, Mayor, if you can call on me when we come back to the substantive motion, that'd be okay.
Okay. Alderman Devaney.
Thank you, Chair, Mayor, for allowing me in. And just on the back of my colleagues' comments, I just want to put on the record, when I look at the amendment, I have no issues with it, but, our party has been very clear on their issue and around what we call the amnesty that has been discussed at the minute. And just put on the record, once again, Mr. Mayor, that we do support all our innocent victims, and that all our innocent victims need truth and justice. And I think anything that can be done to help forward reconciliation in the council area for those innocent victims of the Troubles needs to be welcomed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Fred. Alderman Devaney. Alderman McCready.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of the Ulster Unionist Party, we accept the recommendation, and if I can speak on both for now, we agree. And when you strip it all back, and it's difficult sometimes because it's emotions, it's people's lives, and in the majority of these cases, it's the circumstances of which they were killed is, they're indefensible and undescribable. Some parts when you're trying to, articulate that to people of how deep this really goes. And there's very few parts of our entire community who have not been affected by it and still connected to it in some way through loved ones or, that legacy aspect. And it is right that all victims are in parallel and there's no one above the other. And that goes not just in any sense, in this motion, but, whether it's, aspects of the narrative or how we remember or, how we record history and the facts. And, I recently looked up the statistical breakdown, which I'm not going to articulate that here, but it is a matter of record. And it's mind-blowing when you look at the numbers and try and really humanize it, say these are all people that have been affected and that person has immediate family and then their outer family circle and friends and everything else. So it's deeply emotional, and rightly so. There's an aspect which I do want to address, Mr. Mayor, is there was reference to the Stormont House Agreement, which my party is opposed to, because there is elements within that which do put a difference between the likes of victims and timelines and other orders, but that's not the point for the debate. But it was referenced, and I just have to highlight my opposition to that. And secondly, on this amendment, all parties and all of those groupings out there who represent and speak for victims apolitically rightly oppose the outline of the British government's position on legacy, which no matter which way you use the phrase or the wordology or the grammar, it would be an amnesty, which is wrong, and to remove people's pathway to justice is against everything that any civil society stands for. That kind of route to justice. And if you lay down a line in the sand here in this case, then what type of example does that set for our young people, as we move forward in their lives, and God forbid if anything happens in any other aspect of conflict, does that give the credence and the precedent to terrorism?
Alderman McCready, would you bring your comments to a close, please?
Certainly will. Thanks for letting me speak on it, and we support the recommendation and the motion.
You've had Alderman McCready. Okay, members, I don't see any more dissenting voices, so I'm going to bring the amendment to a vote. Is there any members against the amendment? If there is, could you put on the chat box or highlight to me? Okay, members, the amendment passes unanimous. Now going back, Councillor Hargan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the Claudy bombing was, as others have said, a tragedy that should never have happened, and it cannot be defended. And I'm sure the shock of the tragedy is still as sharp today for the family members and friends of the people who died. And we should remember that. And the people in Claudy and everybody affected should have the right to truth and justice, as should everybody else right across our society. And it's one of them events that is a stark reminder of what we do not want to go back to. None of us want to go back to those days where people were dying on a regular basis and getting injured, and where there was conflict. So we welcome anything that attempts us to move us out of that and keep us away from ever going back there, and allows people to properly grieve and to get justice and to get the truth. So we're happy to support the motion. I don't think that I agree that there shouldn't be a hierarchy of victims. And I think that everybody who died in the Troubles or was hurt or injured, suffered. But some people were presumed innocent straight away, and some people had to campaign for decades and decades and decades just to get acknowledgement that they were innocent too. And I think we should remember that, which doesn't take away from acknowledging and understanding someone else's pain, and so acknowledging that someone else died for no reason. The third thing I want to say is, there is in the motion talk about collusion between the police, the Catholic Church, and British government MPs, and that's of no surprise. The Catholic Church covered up mother and baby homes for a long time, and there's been collusion and cover-ups right through our Troubles. And I think that they all have to be acknowledged. We can't just acknowledge it for one and not acknowledge it in many hundreds of other instances. And so I think that that's important. The last thing to say is there's a lot of talk about reconciliation, and I think we have to fight for reconciliation. I don't believe that it's going to come through the Stormont Executive. I think the Stormont Executive is a place that keeps sectarianism alive. And I think we need to, that kind of change is going to come from the bottom up through people fighting for things to make their lives better. But we'll be supporting this motion, and we hope that that message goes out clearly to the people of Claudy and others impacted directly. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that. Okay, Alderman Ramsey, you want to come in and close down?
Thank you very much, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for a contribution, and Councillor Duffy for the amendment. I think what we do need to keep remembering is Mummy's tears. I think that's very, very important that we remember that. And also the legacy that we have. We need to keep reminding ourselves about all the people out there who to this day suffer the loss of a loved one. And we can't forget either those who still live with injury, those who have been badly injured during the Troubles and have lived with it and still living with it. It's very important that there was unity around this motion tonight, because this motion has everything in it that is needed for moving forward with this country that we live in and love so dear. So again, I thank everyone for supporting the motion, and thank you for all your input. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Fred Alderman. Ranty, members, I'm not obviously need to send the voices against the substantial motion here on the table. If there is any members wishing to abstain or against, would you let me know now? Okay, the substantial motion passes unanimous. Members, moving on to Councillor Hargan to move.
Mayor, before I move the motion, can I ask members to okay a short amendment? In the third paragraph, it says their legislation. Can I change that to the legislation?
Just before we do that there, members, I realise here, obviously, what we do is normally the 2 hours. Are members happy enough to move on here? We continue tonight and get this done. You sure?
Happy to crack on, Mr. Mayor.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to go to the laboratory here anyway. We'll take 10 minutes here, members. I'll see you back at 6:15. So, sorry about that, Councillor Harrigan. We'll get that changed for you now. So we will do, okay?
No problem, Mayor. That's fine. Thanks.
See you at 6:15, members. Okay, members, thank you for that. Moving on now, Councillor Hargan. We've hopefully page 3 on the screen. I'll just give members another few seconds just to get on there.
Okay.
And while we're waiting, you have a seconder for this motion?
A second, Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill.
Mayor,
Okay,
can I just ask again for that, if it's okay to amend in paragraph 3, it's already amended. Thank you. That's great.
yeah, no, happy days.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that Councillor Ferguson recently brought forward an excellent motion that supported parental bereavement pay and leave. And I think we should all welcome the fact that this discussion is now happening in Stormont, that hopefully we will finally have statutory leave that allows people at least 2 weeks to grieve the loss of a child, which is devastating for people and the most difficult time. And that people during that period shouldn't be thinking about bills. They shouldn't be worried about jobs. They should be able to focus on beginning grieving and dealing with all the practical things that you have to deal with and the shock of the loss of a child. So I think as a council, we welcome that and hope that comes to fruition as soon as possible in the next programme for government. As people may have seen, the Coalition for Bereaved Workers has been formed, and it's a wide network of charity organisations, trade unions, mental health organisations, all calling for the same thing. They're asking for the legislation to be extended to include anyone who loses a partner or a close relative. And again, I think that this would be the right thing to do. People who are thrust into this situation are most often forced to take unpaid leave. And sometimes it makes things very, very difficult for them in terms of their job, bills, and everything else. So I think that there should be at least 2 weeks statutory leave and pay for people who lose a close relative or a partner. Our employment laws need updating. This is one aspect of it. It's taken too long, but I think that this is something we can try to put right. And I think that I know the Coalition of Bereaved Workers are hoping, if this motion passes tonight, that it can be sent out and circulated to all the councils right across the north, and they're hoping that the Stormont Economy Committee that is now working on the legislation can look at this and work this in, and so that it's extended to cover more people. And I think that will be the right thing to do. So I'll leave it there, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hargan. Okay, moving on, members. Councillor Riley, you come on the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for bringing me in. And can I start just by thanking Councillor Harkin for tabling it here this evening. It's also been tabled for debate tonight in Belfast City Council as well. But I agree with his point about it should be circulated to all the other councils to try and garner support for this change. As you point out at the start, I'm a member of the Coalition of Bereaved Workers in my capacity as a member of staff for the Alzheimer's Society. And as Councillor Harkin has indicated, there are a number of charities that are driving this coalition, led by Marie Curie, but also Action Mental Health, the Alzheimer's Society, as I've mentioned, CARES NI, the Chartered Institute of Personal Development, Cruise Bereavement and Care, NIPSA, and the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, all together bringing a diverse range of voices and experiences to these issues. Mayor, we know that from the research that Marie Curie has done on this, that around 1 in 7 of employees in Northern Ireland find themselves in a situation where they're unhappy with their bereavement law in relation to the experiences they've had with their employer. We recognise that there are many good employers who do treat their employees with compassion at a time of bereavement, but unfortunately that is not universal. and that's why this legislation is required. We also recognise that the legislation that's going through the Assembly in its current form was to deal with those that had a bereavement where the child was under the age of 18, which therefore meant that people who died who were over the age of 18 were not covered by the existing legislation that is going through the Assembly. We know from the Northern Ireland Statistics Research Agency that around 1% of those that die are under the age of 20. So 99% of the people who die in Northern Ireland aren't covered by the legislation that's going through the Assembly currently, and that's why the coalition feels that this is a missed opportunity to deal with some other bereavement circumstances that affect people in terms of their employment. We know that the coalition is also campaigning for this to be a day one right, that an employee should get these new provisions as soon as they start working for an employer, rather than having to gain those entitlements over a period of time, that they should be afforded to a person as soon as they start work. And we also know that the small businesses that employ a number of people may be wary about the impact that this would have, and that's why the coalition is calling for the financial impact of this to be shouldered by the UK government in terms of revenue and customs, that the finances should be able to be claimed back by a business from revenue and customs. So there's a range of different views, Mayor, out there on this, but the coalition has heard and had meetings with all the members of the Department of the Economy Assembly Committee. They certainly sought meetings with everyone, if not had meetings with them all. We've met with Jerry Carroll, MLA, for example, and other parties, and I think that that's where we need to try and make some changes by amending the legislation that's going through the Assembly. And I'll conclude, Mr. Mayor, with a quote from a lady that Marie Curie has sourced in relation to all of this. She puts it best in terms of the lived experience that she's had to have. And she is a lady called Lucy, who is a worker in Northern Ireland and lost a loved one while in employment. Her story underlies why we need to do more. She said that her relative died on a Sunday. She was back in her work on Wednesday morning. She couldn't afford to take time off work beyond what she had taken, and she wasn't paid for the days that she had to take off. It absolutely affected her ability to grieve. She was completely bereft and exhausted and shell-shocked at the bereavement, and having to worry about money at such a harrowing time is a very real issue for people. So you have no time to grieve if you don't have that employment protection, and putting workers in that unpaid position is simply cruel. So those are the words from Lucy that Marie Curie have endorsed and added to this campaign. And I think that, Mayor, listening to that testimony is why I would encourage everyone to support this motion here before us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I 100% agree. Alderman McConaughey.
Mayor, for letting me in, and this motion of Councillor Harkins is very timely, coming before us now and coming on the back of Councillor Ferguson's motion in the past. I think it is important to note the 6th of October, which is this week, as part of the scrutiny. Department officials are meeting the Committee for the Economy, and I believe that the Minister Gordon Lyons is very supportive of the current proposals that are before him, which will of course only bring us into line with the rest of the UK, and that would be hoped that would be operational by April 2022. But I think it is certainly very important that further consideration is given to extending this. I think this is a first step, and it's just human compassion. People are going through the shock of a bereavement and all the practical things that have to be undertaken immediately following a bereavement. And I think within our own council, just to refer to that last paragraph of it, Mayor, that we are a very compassionate council, I believe, and I think that we can certainly look at our own policies and help to establish the 2-week statutory bereavement leave and look at how we could implement that. So very supportive of the proposal before us. Thank you, Mayor.
The Alderman McConaughey. Councillor Duffy.
Mayor, yeah, and thank you to Councillor Harkin for bringing the motion. It is a really good motion. speaking personally as a manager who has been responsible for staff who have been bereaved and going through a really difficult time, it was always something that was left in my discretion as a manager in terms of time off to allow people to grieve properly. Unfortunately, that isn't the case in all workplaces, and I know that at that really difficult time, you need space, and as Alderman McClintock has said, you need compassion. In terms of our party and on behalf of Sinn Féin, we have met with the coalition and we are very supportive of their asks at this time. And I do think that it is right that we as a council examine our own policies and see that what we can do to support people when they are going through probably the worst time of their life. So I'm happy to support the motion. And again, just thanks to Councillor Harkin for bringing it forward. Thank you.
You for that, Councillor Duffy. Okay, members, I see. Okay, Alderman McCready straight on there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the member for bringing the motion forward. It's a very good link between the one we've had previously from Member Ferguson. We do agree and support the motion. Now, there are some areas which need an awful lot of work, both at the legislative side of this, but also the implications and indeed the ramifications, which some members have mentioned where this would affect. But at the heart of it all, it is at those who have lost the loved one in that case. So my compassion is there. I do support it in the spirit of how we work forward, and anything in council is just to thrash out some of my and my party's understanding of it and to shape it as we move forward. And the first thing it strikes me is it's very difficult sometimes when you're dealing with bereavements in the workplace. And of note on this one here, in terms of the exact wording and language, bereaved of a close relative, kind of end quote. It's sometimes we need to be absolutely clear on what that means. How is that defined? And in a case, how do we manage that? And I say we as a council because ultimately, when we look forward to undertake a review of our own policy, and when the legislation catches up on the first paragraph of this in the next year, it'd be good to see how those two work in tandem and to see if we get any good feedback from that. The second part, I think, Mr. Mayor, we should look at is the duration. It's almost to try and put a time on it doesn't do it justice in a way that everyone is different, everyone's circumstances is different, and everyone's got their own time that they take to go through bereavement. All those stages of a loss. In some cases, that normalization of being back around people in the workplace or wherever it is that you do sometimes can help at a point in time for that person. I just think 2 weeks is relatively arbitrary, and I'm just not sure of how do we really define or set out from 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, and 2 weeks, or where do we draw the line? And is there much latitude for us to look at it on a case by case basis where people may want to come back to work, or in the other case, people may want to take more time off. So it's certainly open for more discussion in detail and to shape our own policy. And I'll be keen to see how that, in tandem with the legislation next year, works out. But yeah, we support the motion, but a lot of work needs done on this, and the ramifications that I'd certainly look to see when we get a report next year from our council officer in terms of kind of impact and how we as a organisation manage and support our employees. And then, how does that convey across to the private sector? Are we going to, some small businesses, we could essentially put them out of business in one case. So there's all sorts of on the spectrum here, but our primary focus is at those who have lost loved ones. So thanks very much to the member for bringing this forward and for allowing me to speak on this, Mr. Mayor. You have our support.
Okay, thank you for that, Alderman McCready. Members, I don't see any further members looking to come on this. So I'm going to back to Councillor Hargan. They close it off.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments, and I'm sure the Coalition for Bereaved Workers are thankful as well, and will be glad to hear that there's so much support for this. And Councillor Riley mentioned a worker who was speaking out about this. I just want to, if you haven't already read it, I would recommend people go and look at the it's at the Marie Curie website. That's the statutory bereavement leave and pay in Northern Ireland, a call to action, and that's the document that really lays out the case for extending the legislation to cover people who've lost a partner or a loved one. And look, there is a very clear criteria for this. I'm not going to go through the details, but people put some thought into, well, in what cases and how do you determine that? But that there's been some thought gone into that. I mean, this is really about creating a more caring society. And, you know, you just think about how people have struggled and coped with COVID and the pandemic over the last year and a half. I mean, people who've had to deal with bereavement on top of everything else, it must have been so difficult. And for people not to be able to just know that they had the safety net of a couple of weeks off to deal with the practical things or to grieve, you know, that's why this needs to be changed. And I think that's why we need to respond to this call to action. And I agree. Look, I think that this should be at this, you know, 2 weeks as a basic in terms of statutory, you know, leave and pay. I think that there's going to be all sorts of different circumstances for people. And I think in a caring society, you wouldn't start by being suspicious about people. You'd start by saying, you know, how do we help you become whole? How do we help you grieve? How do we make sure, you know, that you are able to move forward with your life and so on? So I think that, you know, getting this in there will move things, you know, in the right direction. And yeah, I agree. Look, I think that even if this is going to be taken forward at government level, if our council can help to lead the way, I think that will move the whole process forward. So, you know, I think that this would be a good thing for our council to be able to do as well, and send a message to our workers and others about, you know, the respect we have and the understanding that and appreciation that we have for our council workforce. So thank you, everyone. And then again, if people can agree that we can send this out to other councils, that based on the request of the coalition, that would be great. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horgan. Members, I don't see anybody against the motion. Councillor Horgan here. Any members against it or want to abstain? You put on the chat box or let me know. Okay, members, the motion from Councillor Horgan passes unanimous. Moving on. The final motion from Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Mayor. Can I have the motion as read and seconded?
Happy to second.
Who's that? Sorry, second that.
Horgan.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Horgan, second. Go ahead, Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Mayor. So the upcoming United Nations COP26 Global Climate Summit to be held in Glasgow is a really crucial moment in the struggle to stop climate disaster. So far, governments have done too little and too late, colluding with corporations and continuing the exploitation of workers and the planet. The decisions that are going to be made at COP26 will shape how governments respond or not to the climate crisis, and they'll decide who is to be sacrificed, who will escape, and who will make a profit. The global protests will send the message to more than 200 world leaders attending that they have failed to act on climate emergency pledges. Greta Thunberg, said in a speech to the Youth for Climate Summit in Milan in Italy 2 weeks ago, is what she said: build back better, blah, 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 green economy, blah, 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 net zero by 2050, blah, blah, blah. This is all we hear from our so-called leaders, words that sound great but so far have not led to action. Our hopes and ambitions drown in their empty promises. And I think that's true for Westminster, for the Stormont Executive and the Dáil governments. They've all failed to take the urgent and radical action needed. Examples of our own political establishments' business as usual approach to the climate crisis are plentiful. Nothing has yet been done to clean up my boy dump. The Derry rail upgrade could be delayed for another decade, and the DFI minister ran through destructive dredging of Lough Neagh, and the Stormont executive look like they're desperate to greenlight Dalradian Gold's toxic mining plan in the Sperrins. And corporations are interested in plundering nature for profit, and the Stormont executive has spent 20 plus years letting them do it. You know, our environment here is in an awful state. And, you know, we cannot let the executive to use a new climate bill to greenwash ineffective environmental policies either. And at the end of the day, it's an economic system that is at war with life on Earth. The IPCC report has called for transformative systemic change. And what we need to do is transform our economic system in a way that production is based on need and not profit, based on cooperative and democratic systems of worker and community control. The climate crisis is a social justice issue, with those who have done least to cause the crisis are those who are most vulnerable to its effects. And it's the poorest and most vulnerable in our society who feel the greatest impacts of climate change. But whether it's the end of the world with the climate crisis or the end of the month for workers' wages, it's the same fight. Because the change needed to avert catastrophic climate change actually has the potential to improve the quality of life for the vast majority of people on the planet. But this type of change will only come from below. People power is the key to forcing decision makers away from government's do-nothing systemic approach, focusing only on individual actions. We need a radical departure from destructive capitalist policies, and that's the only way a problem of this scale can be addressed. The change we need will come from the power of ordinary people organising, campaigning, and fashioning new solutions. This is literally the fight for our lives and for the lives of future generations. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rishfat. Okay, members, Councillor Michaela Boy.
Thank you, Mayor, and I want to thank the mover of the motion, Councillor O'Neill, and to acknowledge there is of little comfort for anybody, not least for us in so-called developed and industrialised nations when reading the IPCC report. But I'm glad that this council was the first out of the traps in terms of acknowledging and moving the issue of climate change through our community planning and local development planning processes, going back as far as 2015. This council has frequently debated the North's significant and underperformance in terms of meeting modern standards of environmental protections. We only have to look at the situation that we have inherited in Mowboy in our own district to see how a dysfunctional system we had. Our concerns are set within a context where we have witnessed an alarming decline in environmental quality and mounting concerns about the very real impacts that the climate crisis will inflict on an already weakened environment right across this island. Scotland and Wales have already enacted climate change legislation, while we here in the North have effectively lost 10 years since Paris in terms of moving this issue forward. People are frustrated at the lack of intervention, so there is no surprise that in 2020, 75% of people here support a Climate Change Act, and 66% of people here support a net zero emissions target for 2045. In responding to the IPCC report, emissions expert at University College Cork, Dr. Hannah Daly, has confirmed a certain amount of damage in global warming is already locked in. No matter what we do, and there will be further extreme weather events, and that will become more frequent and damaging until we completely stop emitting greenhouse gases. Every choice, every emission, and every bit of warming matters. How bad climate change will get depends on our actions and choices from now. Legislation is currently moving through the Assembly, and we in Sinn Féin are actively working to shape that legislation to ensure that it marries climate justice with a transition and that it absorbs the overall message conveyed by the IPCC report, that the current and projected severity of climate change is now beyond doubt. As an issue which is simultaneously local and global, climate change requires us here in the North to make a suitably challenging contribution to redressing these circumstances, both in terms of shielding ourselves and the next generation from negative projected local impacts, and also in terms of assisting global society and humanity in general. Mayor, Sinn Féin will be supporting the motion brought forward by Councillor O'Neill here this evening. Gurmila Mayogat.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Councillor Edwards.
Mayor, thanks for bringing me in. The SLP are happy to support this motion, and we thank the member for moving it tonight. In early August, the IPCC released a hugely damaging Red for Humanity report on the planet's current environmental state. It concluded that we're running out of time to reverse the increasingly irreparable effects of climate change on the planet. They have called for urgent action on the environment, as the evidence of the current impact of climate change continues to grow and become even more stark. The report highlights an abundance of hugely damaging consequences surrounding rising temperatures, rising sea levels, and the melting of ice caps. All of these are of major concern, and it is incumbent on all governments to act immediately on this. The SDLP fully support the protesters in Glasgow, as referenced in the motion, and elsewhere in the world, including here, who will be demanding action on climate change at COP26 as world leaders meet to hopefully agree a way forward in Scotland next month. The future of the planet really is at stake, and I hope that international leaders make the right decisions next month. As for us locally, I hope that legislation will continue to go through Stormont. The SLP has not been found wanting when it comes to the environment. Locally, we are a co-sponsor of the bill going through the Assembly, and our party leader, Colm Eastwood, is also leading the charge in Westminster in bringing forward legislation. And Mayor, I'd also like to point out that the infrastructure ministers, who some in this chamber seemingly love to criticise, and disappointing to hear it again in the opening remarks of the proposer of this motion, but she was the one who secured the Northern Ireland Climate Summit before COP26 to look at where we are failing and to look at opportunities to step up and work together on climate change. And on a final point, Mayor, I think it is unforgivable that as we face this crisis, as the report highlights, that the DUP are continuing to threaten to pull down the Assembly, which will leave us with no representation at COP26. And will also put to bed any advancement of localised climate change legislation here. But against this backdrop, Mayor, the SLP are happy to support the motion before us tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Alderman Corrigan.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in, and I do thank the member for bringing forward the motion. Mayor, we are in very difficult times, and there's no one stating that there's that we have to act. There has to be work done. We are in a period of climate change, and there's no denying that. And there is a lot of difficulty there at present, Mayor. As has been stated, we're not content with the current local bill that's been brought forward through Stormont, Mayor, because personally I feel that it will devastate the farming community, and particularly in this lower end of the council area. You know, it has a potential to cause massive damage and wipe out a lot of business, wipe out a lot of small self-employed farms, and I do have grave concerns on that. Again, Mayor, I'm not definitely there's an issue that needs to be dealt with, and again, we're a quality producing country here of our foodstuffs, which we need to survive here. We have the demand for it, the local demand for a quality product, and Mayor, again, fully support in regards to that. There has to be work done, and there has to be finance provided globally to some of the other countries which are causing serious emissions. I mean, when we're looking at the emissions there, China is the largest emissions. So 30% of the global emissions are out of China. They have increased there since the Kyoto Protocol there, 55%. There's up. Now, the US, yes, are the second largest CO2 emission provider, but they have reduced, still not enough. But you have India, who have doubled their CO2 emissions. You have Russia again, who's the fourth, and Japan, who's the fifth. Japan have reduced theirs, but we're still looking at those countries. And I know a thing that's often mentioned, Mayor, in regards to the rural end, as regards to Brazilian beef being brought in here, and the rainforest being cut down for larger cattle ranches so that cheaper beef can be brought in. So they are in the top 15. Thankfully, the UK is not in the top 15 there, but still, there is definitely room for improvement. But we've got to have something done with these with the nations there in regarding to get the global CO2 emissions down, and I welcome that. But I do have difficulty as with the current ballot storming because I think it will devastate our rural economy. And Mayor, I do have concerns in regards to if I see where I've read it there.
Alderman, can you bring your remarks
Yeah,
to a
I'll bring
close?
it to a close now. Calling on people to come out. I thought I'd read that. Sorry, I'm looking at this bill differently here. Mass mobilisation. Mayor, I'm concerned about calling for mass mobilisation at the time of COVID, and I'm not content with that. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you for that. Alderman McCready.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And we welcome the motion, which we support, but as always, challenge, due consideration and discussion will continue. And I suppose when you look at it in the context, whether we talk globally or indeed the lifespan of the planet, and we say generally, 4.5 billion years old, the planet has transformed, it's grew, it's went hot, it's went cold. But yet when humans have got to a point now where we've been through iterations of different types of industrialization, digitalization, and just instant gratification, when humans again domesticated animals, transformed their land for agriculture, it has significant impacts. Albeit now it's caught up with us, and we got away with it for the last couple of thousand years. And so it does fall on our generation, I suppose, we recognized and identified a problem, but the hardest part now is the solution. How do we transform our culture, our mindset, our way of life to everything we do, to try and protect the planet and live and keep it as good as long as we can for the next millennia, if we can. And there's a few good points that came up from other members. And again, there's a scale here of, between radical, being conservative in terms of your action or your methodologies used to how you tackle climate change, or how you support legislation that would set the conditions to change that. And to take all accounts into consideration, we even in this council have looked at all aspects, speaking to us, informing us, using science, data, and real life events. And the Ulster Farmers Union did stick in my mind that they, as an organisation, and largely when it comes to shaping this current bill in the Assembly, there are large parts missing of, well, okay, yeah, we all share the intent, we have a common goal, and we want to achieve it. But people are going to be squeezed at some point, and there needs to be mechanisms, whether that be financial incentives, carrot or stick, or however we do that. But we can't ignore them, Mr. Mayor. We must include everyone, whether it's popular, unpopular. It's one that needs to be said. And
Alderman McCready, you bring your comments to a close, please.
yeah, that's me done. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, members. I don't see speakers on it, so everybody get Councillor Daly closes now.
Mayor, Alderman Devaney here. My apologies. I was trying to get into the chat box here last. Mayor, would you allow me to speak just before she sums up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and I say I apologize. I know my colleague has spoken and around the notice of motion coming forward here, and he did raise a number of concerns that, and I'm not going to go right over them all again. I've heard Lough Neagh mentioned by the proposer, and I talk to farmers who live up and around that Lough Neagh area, and I have to say, they are very supportive of the loch being dredged because it saves a lot of their land around there, land that they make a living on, and if it wasn't dredged, it would be returned back into the loch again. But Mayor, just to put it on the record, our party will be abstaining on the notice of motion. Thanks, Mayor. And I think it's only us.
Thank you for that, Alderman Devaney. Oh, okay. Mr. Lee, do you want to come and close it down?
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for those who are supporting the motion. And I think it's clear that we cannot continue with business as usual when we have a climate emergency. It's a crisis, and we need to treat it like a crisis. And Alderman McCready has described the adaptability of humans to whatever challenge comes our way. And like, I do think ordinary people are up for this challenge because they care about the well-being of future generations. How do we go about it? It's that we have to take the power away from the rich and from the corporations who are calling the shots and who are actually doing most of the polluting. Like, a lot of the government's actions on climate change puts it all on the individual, where it's actually systemic change that needs to happen, and the power needs to come back to ordinary people and to communities. But that is system change, and it's uncomfortable, maybe for the establishment who are used to having those reins of power. But this is what needs to happen. And just to answer Alderman Kerrigan's point around the climate bill and the concerns of farmers, that the key thing that is missing in the Minister Putz's climate bill is the just transition. And it's the just transition that safeguards the future of farming here in the north. It'll put those safeguards to ensure that these transition strategies that we need in the face of the climate crisis are safeguarded, so that farming is future proofed, because like farmers feel the effects of climate change on their crops and on their animals, and it is farmers who we need to be working with. We cannot continue to have this battle against farming and business as usual and the climate crisis. We actually need to work together on sustainable solutions, because the solutions exist, but we need, as you say, we need the investment and we need the energy behind it. So we do. I think it was Alderman Kerrigan who talked about the global nature of the climate crisis. And one thing I forgot to mention was around immigration laws, because as the climate crisis worsens, there are going to be more climate refugees, and we need to open our borders because us in the global north are far more responsible for the way that the climate is just now. And yes, like China and Russia are now big polluters, but that's because we have exported our capitalist system to those countries. And there's there's a biodiversity crisis as well as a climate crisis. But the mood of the people is for change, and we really need to. That's why we do need the mass mobilisation to ensure that change happens, because it's only going to come from below. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. So, members, I don't see any dissenting voices. I hear abstentions. So, as far as where the EP standing, so 6 is standing. I don't see any members against it. So, we'll take this motion from Councillor Lee as passed. Members, moving on. The agenda 6, 7, 8, 9 is for members' information. Councillor Farrell, responses to motion 2.4 and 2. Okay, we'll take it one by one. Go ahead there, Councillor Farrell.
Thanks, Mayor. So in terms of responses to motions, 2.4 and 2.7 and the pack relate to our motion on the drugs crisis and our motion on the mental health strategy. And there are a number of responses in the pack, and there's a common theme that is running through those responses, and it's namely about the New Decade New Approach commitment to fund an addiction centre in Derry and how that aligns with the substance use strategy. So nobody knows how that is going to work. At a council meeting in February, we had a motion calling on the Secretary of State to provide an update on progress towards funding the addiction centre in the Northwest. And to the best of my knowledge, we don't have a response. I had asked the Director of Health and Community at the committee in June, did we have a response? And the answer was no. And it was agreed that we were going to chase that. So I know Karen McFarland is on here. I can see her there in WebEx. So I'm asking, have we had a response from the Secretary of State regarding our motion in February about the New Decade New Approach commitment to fund an addiction centre in the Northwest? And before Karen answers, I'd like to just welcome good news regarding mental health. Minister Swan has announced that Extern are going to be funded to the tune of £500,000 to deliver the Community Crisis Intervention Service for the next 3 years. So I think that's fantastic news and it's well deserved. But I would appreciate a response from Karen regarding communication with the Secretary of State. Thank you.
Mayor, members, any responses that we have received have already been tabled. So unless something has happened in the last couple of days, no, we don't have a response, Councillor Farrell, on that issue.
Okay, thanks for that update, Karen. Well, I would ask that maybe we chase that correspondence again, because that New Decade New Approach commitment has been ongoing since January 2020. We wrote to the Secretary of State in March, which is what, 8 months ago? Well, 7 months ago, and we still don't have an answer. So I think it would be prudent if we contacted Mr. Lewis yet again, just to understand what's happening with that very important commitment within the document. The second item I wish to raise is 2.8, and it's regarding the culture, arts and heritage strategy. We had written to the Minister for Communities regarding regional inequalities when it comes to government funding for arts and culture across the north. And members will be aware that organisations in Belfast get 11 times the funding from the Arts Council compared to organisations that are based locally. There were a number of requests in our motion. We called the Minister to confirm that regional disparities exist. That wasn't mentioned in the response. We called on the Minister to detail that addressing these regional disparities would be contained in the strategy. Again, there was a vague reference, but nothing concrete. And we also called on the Minister to instruct the Arts Council to re-enlighten its budget profiles, and that wasn't mentioned at all. But I do note that the communication stated that they would like to engage with the Council regarding the motion. So I do think it is important that we engage with DFC and invite senior officials within the department and the Minister to a meeting of business and culture. And I know Business and Culture meets next week. I haven't seen the meeting pack yet. I don't know if it's going to be on the agenda, but I think it should be. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. I fully agree. It's absolutely tremendous news there coming out over the weekend about obviously the 3-year funding that's been secured now for mental health support funds. And it's will obviously enable the community crisis intervention service something it's absolutely really needed at the minute out there. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of ones arising from item 6, and it's the appendices, the replies that we've had. The first one is regarding the second appendix on page 11, which is a reply from Anna and Oma. And you know, I'm looking at the reply. I just want to express my utter disappointment. The reply is with regard to the former GNR line from Strabane to Londonderry, but there's more to it than that, because we were talking in terms of that line where it ran through Oma on through to Portadown, etc. But the reply from Oma, the detail on the motion recently adopted by your council was noted. You know, okay, they've noted it. They intend to do sweet nothing about it, and I find that extremely disappointing. And I'm just making that as a comment. I'm moving on then to appendices 7 and 8, which are with regard to the. It's on page 26. If I can get to it. with regard to the sub-regional, where am I here? Sorry. The sub-regional stadia programme. A couple of things arising from those two appendices. I note that Karen McFarland, our director, has been very active in that, and that it's mentioned in there as a delegate representing CLOA and offering our expert insight into soccer facilities needed across our council region. And I wonder, I know Karen's on there, if she could possibly outline to members the nature of her input and insight into the needs of our region. Perhaps not tonight, but perhaps at some stage Karen could update us on the input that she's had on that. And I also note that there has been an offer of a meeting with the regional experts on this who are dealing with it. They've offered to meet with Derry City and Strabane District Council with regard to the Brandywell. I'd welcome such a meeting, but I would also emphasise it's not just a meeting about the Brandywell. There's also the other stadia with regard to football throughout our council area, and I would think that such a meeting, if it's arranged, should include all of the football stadia relative to our district council area. And I have a final point. Do you want to deal with that one before I move to the final appendices I want to deal with, Mayor?
Yeah, I'll do. Yeah.
Just go ahead, or okay, I'll go ahead. The last one is the very last appendix that we have, and it's a reply from DFI with regard to white lining. Contractor was active within Derry City over the past 2 months. Now that was from June, July. This then said that concentrating activities, and is now concentrating activities to Man Castle Derry, as that's dated 19th of August. So roughly, we're coming up on 2 months that we've been told in this letter that they're concentrating activities in Strabane Castle Derry. Well, I trust that my other Derry colleagues would agree that there are issues that we have raised with regard to white lining, and I don't see them being addressed yet. Now, 2 months were spent in the city, and I'm not aware of whatever white lining programs were carried on there, but there were issues raised by myself, Councillor McHugh, and other Derry representatives with regard to white lining. We're told here it's been ongoing for 2 months, but I'm sorry, I don't see what's been happening. So, I would ask that we contact DFI again as a council and ask, what exactly have you done in the Strabane and Castle Derrick areas that's mentioned in this particular letter? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Councillor Hargan, is that in the same points Alderman Hussey brought up there?
Different points, Mayor.
That's okay. Just when I bring it this one, Councillor Turner, you want to come on the same points?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. Mayor, it's just, I suppose, really a point of clarification in relation to one of the points that Alderman Hussey brought up around the regional substadia funding. At Thursday's original full council meeting, during the ratification of the minutes, I raised at C365/21 the Melvin Arena update that the minute that was noted was actually incorrect, and it should have read that officials from the department will brief members on phase 2 of the regional substadia funding programme and not on the Brandywell. So the point that Alderman Hussey is making was actually made on Thursday night, and I think, if my memory serves me right, he actually agreed and supported me whenever I was doing that. So the meeting, again, to be clear, is in relation to the regional substadia programme, not in relation to the Brandywell alone, and that should provide then opportunities for officers and for members to speak to other clubs right across the district. I remember very clearly whenever I was proposing this at that particular meeting, that I did mention a number of clubs. I mentioned Institute, Strabane Athletic, and possibly Derryview all, and maybe more, I don't know. The meeting needs to be about the programme, not about the Brandywell alone, because as I said last Thursday night, the department officials at this stage, to the best of my knowledge, wouldn't be aware of the plans for phase 2 of the Brandywell. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Turley. Councillor Hargan.
Yeah, it's 2.9, agenda item 6, Mayor, 2.9 and 2.14. The first is just a question for council officers. I'm glad to see that DFC officials have agreed to come and speak to the council in regards to personal independence payment and the ombudsman report. And it does say that they're happy to speak alongside Capita officials. Has anyone from Capita agreed to speak to the council? And then my second one is just on the response from ministers, especially the economy minister regarding our letter to them about Stormont now having the ability, if it chooses, to set minimum wage levels. And it's very disappointing to see how dismissive he is about this, given that people have campaigned for this for a long time. And he just says we're just choosing not to look at it, which I think, given the kind of chronic low wages so many people suffer with, and all the campaigns for better pay, it's a very, very, very disappointing response.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hargan. Ellen, could you comment on the first point?
Through you, Chair, I'm just checking to see if I have any notes in terms of Capita, but I would say to members that all of the correspondence that we've received is contained within the committee papers, and we haven't received anything further to date. In terms of Capita, as I say, we have invited representation, and we are awaiting confirmation in terms of a special H&C committee to be held on, at the minute, provisionally for the 20th of October. But what I'll do there is, as I say, confirm with the Director of Health and Communities if that date has now been firmed up. So we're certainly liaising with DFC and Capita in terms of that meeting at the moment, if that's of any assistance to members. And sorry, I think I missed the other point. If somebody would like to repeat it.
That Ellen, thank you for that update. And maybe if we can directly ask Capita officials to, again, or if there's a way that the DFC could do that, that would be great. And the second, I was just more, it wasn't a question, I was just making a statement on the letter, but thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Councillor Hargan, for that. Members, Councillor Edwards on Appendix 2.
Mayor, thanks for letting me in. Just on the same issue as Alderman Hussey originally raised there, around the reopening of the Great Northern Railway. I'm unsure where we're at with that. I believe I'm not too sure whether the proposal was made or accepted, but I believe there was a proposal at a stage to bring in into the West lobbying group and DFA officials to talk about local rail and expanding local rail. I'm not too sure which committee that sits on. I'd imagine maybe Health and Communities. I'm not too sure, but I'm just wondering for clarification whether that proposal was made and accepted, and whether those two meetings are going to be set up or not, Mayor.
Mayor, through you, I can certainly answer that. Into the West are coming into Governance Committee tomorrow evening.
Thank you for that, John. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Moving on, Councillor Lug on response motions.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to come in on the response regarding the GP services from Minister Swan. A note that he said that the new model of of doctors seeing patients or not seeing patients is now embedded in the system, and that telephone consultation first is the way that they see it going. We have great concerns about this. Every citizen has a right to see a doctor, and they shouldn't be having to jump through hoops, go through a receptionist first to try and get a phone call back from a doctor. It's totally unacceptable. We do agree that, you know, a new model can be worked out, and that in some cases telephone consultation would suffice. However, it is a right for every citizen to see a doctor, and that shouldn't be determined by a receptionist or the doctor themselves. If a person is subscribed with a doctor, then they have the right. It is their duty to see people, and we feel that we should still bring the General Medical Council and the Federation of GPs and Right Again to Minister Swan, saying that you know, it has the right of citizens in the first instance to see a GP if they so wish. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Logue. Okay, members. Councillor Turley, you're in with us, getting your teeth in this one. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, and I appreciate that it's you're trying to get wrapped up. It's just in relation to Councillor Logue's point there, and I do fully sympathise with anybody who has found it difficult to get a doctor's appointment. But do we know, or are we aware of current surgeries that are putting in this practice? Because I don't think it's all surgeries, and I don't think it's fair that we stroke everyone with the same brush, so to speak. I had a doctor's appointment only 3 weeks ago, and I got in to see my GP, and I had a conversation with him. Yes, they did ring me back to make sure that I wasn't in contact with anyone who had COVID-19, but it was very, very easy to get that appointment. So before we do what Councillor Logue suggesting, do we have any idea across the council area of the number of doctor surgeries that are doing what Councillor Logue is saying? Because I don't believe that all doctors are doing that. I listened to a GP on the radio only last week who was saying that right throughout the pandemic, they and that particular practice has been seeing patients right throughout the pandemic. So I would just like to get some information on that if it's available. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Turley.
Mayor, if I could just come on again very briefly.
Okay, members, this is the last one, okay?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not saying that doctors are not seeing patients. Indeed, they have continued to see patients through the pandemic. That is not the issue. The issue is now that it appears to be the practice that most doctors are practicing, that it's a telephone consultation first. Indeed, that's what's written in Minister Swan's reply, that this practice is firmly embedded now within the system. And I know from my own GP and from listening to many, many constituents, they are really, really concerned about not being able to access their GP as of right. So it is that I feel we need to be pursuing, that it's not good enough just for one doctor surgery to practice one thing and another to practice another. We need to ensure that all patients have the right to see a doctor whenever they feel they need to see one. Thank you.
Councillor Turley, just on the question in the chat box, we don't know, but I'm sure that will come back in the health and communities. That could be discussed in that committee. Members, I'd like to bring this meeting to a close today, and thank you to you all, and I wish you all have a great evening. So the meeting is now closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor.